they have lost a lot of respect, and they've lost a lot of trust from the private landowners, and in some respects probably from the counties. But when they show up, I've had them because of the experiences I've had with them. I've had them show up and take over. Number one, they can't get to the country. They don't even know where they're going, number one. Number two, when they get there, they can't get off the road. Well, the fires is not on the road, so they sit back and they twiddle their thumbs and they wait until it comes to them, and when it comes to them, they don't have time to do anything about it. So I've told some federal firefighters, as far as I was concerned, they can stay on the highway and stay out of my way. What we need is their equipment. Now, when they come in, they really do want to help and they want to do the right thing, and I appreciate that. But when they come in and get in my way, and I have people that's there to put out the fire and they call them off, I got a real problem with that as a landowner. Now, we've talked a lot about communication. Communication is great, absolutely needed. And y'all have touched on it, and I'm not going to go back over all the things y'all have touched on because y'all have done a good job of asking questions, pointed questions. But communication without organization is worthless. Communication and organization without implementation is worthless. You got to have all three. And that's not just communication and organization from the state level. It's got to come down to the local level, to the people that know how to get to the fires. They know whose property it's on. They know how to get into that property. They know how to get permission with that property. They know what the country and the terrain's like. So in some respects, when the state and federal fire departments show up, they need to answer to the local governments and the landowners that's there. And there needs to be someone in those counties that is a command, at the command center, that knows the people, the owners of the land, and have contact with them. And they need to be the one helping to organize and implement and communicate. Because if it's left up to a three-way deal and everybody comes in and they're all talking a different language, you're not going to have anything but a mess. Now let's talk a little bit about communication at another level. I made the comment that the same issues that we're talking about today are the same issues that we talked about in 2006, 2010, 2011, 2017, now in 2023. The communication breakdown then, and I know it's been a breakdown because I was one of them in 2006 that went to Austin and tried to get some implementation and some changes in state laws, state regulations to get some help. And the communication breakdown then was at the political level. I had the same discussion about this communication, organizational implementation with the Texas Forest Service back in 2006. I had the same one back in 2010, 2011. And thought that we had some good ideas going forward, incorporated Texas Southwest Cattle Raiders into those talks, had several landowners, and we're still facing the same problems today. So we have an opportunity today to start taking a negative disaster and making something positive out of it. But it doesn't just take communication and the mitigation part of it. It takes communication from the landowner to the state. So as we go forward, I ask that every one of you, as you're going through this process, to give the landowners a seat at the table, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Implementation on paper does not always work in the real world. Things change in the real world. Wind changes direction. Wind gets up. Humidity changes. water availability changes. Yes, we do need infrastructure for water. I have no doubt about that. Jason, you brought up a good point. Dirt tanks. The problem with something that was said this morning with EQIP, there's a lot of times EQIP's not worth the paper it's written on. And that's just a fact of the matter. If you have enough earned income that you don't qualify, and if you don't have enough income, you can't afford to pay for your half. So there ought to be quite a bit of money left in the EQIP program because nobody can use the darn thing. Now, you go to the big and dirt tanks at Guthrie, Texas. During the drought, I cleaned out every dirt tank we had on 143,000 acres because they were all dry. And I'd built a whole bunch of new ones because we had an opportunity. There wasn't anything else to do because we didn't have any cows left on the ranch. But the problem is, about half of those new ones that I built didn't hold because the ground wasn't conducive. We had gyp cavities, gyp rocks, and they'd fill up after a big rain when it finally did rain, and then they'd drain out in about a week, look like a bathtub in the center with a whirlpool. A lot of the dirt tanks in the Texas Panhandle won't hold when you build them. So there's an issue there. So we're going to have to come up with some other plan to have access and availability to water, not only for planes, for fire trucks, but for helicopters. So there's going to have to be some work done on that. Let's talk about prescription burning. I use prescribed burns because they are beneficial in some cases to help your land. Brush control, but you know, there's been a lot of talk about the black line or the control burn that was done south of Borger. That was done on the 4.6s. We gave approval for it, and there's not a landowner in this room that would be objectionable to doing something like that to protect a community, houses, a town. I would be totally shocked if there was land over here that would be against that. The problem is the county had a heck of a time getting permission from the state to actually do it. Now, as was mentioned, I believe yesterday, I think Jason, you brought it up. Did it have an effect in saving Borger? Sure. But the wind changed and it was a backburn, guys. It was not a head fire. I've watched these head fires jump 4-lane highways. And we have 3 ranches that total 270,000 acres. And if I'm putting in black lines to try to protect ourselves from a wildfire, I'm going to ask this may be too simple, but where the heck am I going to put the darn thing? I can put it on the south and southwest side of the ranch. How far out you want me to go? Things jump rivers. It jumps 4-lane highways. And if I build a black line that's 400 yards wide, what keeps it from starting 405 yards away? You want me to control burn the whole ranch? I'm not in the business of controlling fires. I'm in the business of running a cattle operation that's supposed to make money. The return on an investment on a cow is about 1.5% to 2% a year. And if I jeopardize my grazing and my good steward that I've done to have grazing and to improve the grazing, then why am I in business if I'm going to do control burns? That doesn't benefit the ranch. Now, I want to clarify something. I've heard some talk here about natural disasters, acts of God. Is there many causes of fire? Yes. chains on the highway. That's a cause. Some idiot throwing a cigarette out when the wind's blowing 90 miles an hour during a drought. Possibility. I have been through several lawsuits because that's the only way that we as landowners have to fight to get changes made. We have up to this point won every lawsuit we've had, and we lost money. And every one of them, when the lawyers get involved, they want to say, well, the wind was blowing, it was an act of God. And it broke a telephone pole over. Well, let me tell you something. I challenge anybody in here to dig up all the telephone poles they want. You're not going to find roots growing on the bottom of any of them. God didn't plant those telephone poles. Man did. And if a man has infrastructure that he's put into the ground, he is responsible to maintain that infrastructure. Now, there's been comments made in the past that if the landowner knows that there's a problem, it's his responsibility to notify people and to make sure the problem's taken care of. There's 50 different operators on the Dixon Creek Division alone. I'm not talking about just oil companies, and I'm talking about pumpers, I'm talking about oil field, talking about gas, talking about utility companies, goes on and on. I cannot, and my employees cannot, be the one to police and inspect all the power lines, flow lines, meter boxes. So I'm going to be real blunt. It is not the landowner's responsibility to police somebody else's business and infrastructure. Period. The instant we as landowners start doing that, we become liable for the problem. Now, can there be fires that are acts of God? Absolutely. Is that anybody's fault and is anybody liable for it? No. Is every oil company and every operator that's on the 4-6s bad operators and bad actors? No. Is there some bad actors? Yes. The problem is, in the mitigation of it, there's nobody that polices it. Let's talk about prevention now. I've lived in the Texas Panhandle. I was born at Clarendon, Texas. I have lived in the Texas Panhandle my entire life, or been involved heavily with the Texas Panhandle my entire life. I grew up with the wind blowing and my front door going and having to put wet towels down at the door and on the windows to keep the dust from coming into the house. The wind has not changed. Have we had droughts in the last 65 years? Absolutely. Have we had high wind times in the last 65 years? Absolutely. What's changed? The same infrastructure that was there in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s is the same dadgum infrastructure for the most part that's there right now today. With no change, no updates, no infrastructure that's been maintained well. How do I know that in some cases it had been maintained well? The fire in 2006 was started on the 4-6s ranch, and when the experts come in and determined where the fire was located, which is not hard to do, by the way. If you got a high wind, all you got to do is look on a map of the fire and it goes back to the closest, most narrow point. That's where it starts and it expands out. Do you know how that the problem was notified by the experts? There was a meter box that had 12 fuses laying on the ground, and when the pumper was asked why it's there, he said, "Oh, we leave those there so we know there's a problem." If you got a problem, you're supposed to fix it. That's where the fire started in 06, We lost 20,000 acres then. It burned all the way over to the Abraham Ranch. 5 people lost their lives. Multiple homes. That was in 2006. I can go out to the Dixon Creek Division right now today and drive around, and I can show you problems that's been there since 2006. No change. If you want to talk about natural disasters, let's talk about natural disasters. In the mitigation you've been talking about and trying to get to where we can fight fires better, more power to you. Because we're going to have some natural disasters that we're going to have to fight and contend with. But if you want to talk about the problems that we're talking about today, these are man-made problems that have not been dealt with. There's no oversight. The oil companies, the utility companies are going to have to go back in, and they're going to have to update their infrastructure, and they're going to have to maintain that infrastructure in a responsible manner. It's going to take somebody else to oversee it. And right now, guys, there's nobody overseeing it. Period. Now, I'm not going to point fingers at an agency, but I'll tell you right now, whatever agency is supposed to be responsible for it, they're not responsible for it. They're not doing their job, and they need to do their job. So let's talk about the mitigation and doing a better job, getting the communication right, getting it where we can work with the state agencies, the Forest Service. Let's get a good working relationship for them, but I'm telling you, it's going to take some time to get trust back. And when we get trust back, then we can be good partners. But until then, all you're doing is creating a better Band-Aid to put on a problem that we can't fix without prevention. We got a lot of work to do, guys, from now until y'all meet again. And I encourage you to call on the Texas Southwest Cattle Raiders. They're a good partner in helping you come up with a good plan. But at that table, you need to have landowners. And I will shut up, and I'll be redundant in anything I say now, and I'll be glad to answer any kind of questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Squadron. Members, any questions to start off with? Mr. Graver.
Mine's pretty short. I mean, me and you could talk all freaking day and never have a disagreement. And that's exactly what I agree with everything you just said. And you answered most of my questions as we went. Go back to the 06 fire. It started on you, and I stopped it on me. So we've been connected ever since then. I got to find some of the dead people that had burned up, and I've talked about that a lot. And I feel like me talking about mistakes other people have made maybe helped in some less death along the way, because we've honed our skills. And like you said, act of God, when a pole's cut in half and it falls over, that might not be an act of God. And like you said, the wind's been blowing. The wind's not blowing any harder than it used to. I come right by your country that day. I was driving down the highway, and I didn't go, whoa, man, this is the windiest day I've ever seen in my life. I was like, no, this is another day in the Panhandle. So I want to thank you for your testimony, and I want to, your wealth of knowledge means a lot. And
I want to, and I'll take any more questions, but I want y'all to look at this a little different way. We don't encourage alcoholism, any of us. But the reality is, if you look at some of this infrastructure on some of these companies, and I'm not going to point fingers, name names, I can, but I'm not going to. But a lot of these companies and this infrastructure are a little bit alcoholic. The utility companies are the bar and the bartender that's serving them drinks. The agency that's supposed to oversee them is that good old boy that gives them the keys to drive. And guys, if we're going to lead, whether it's private landowners, our state officials, our representatives, our associations. There's been a lot of said in the past few years about leading from behind. I don't know where you come from, but that's following. And if you follow, you're going to end up with more fire. So if you're going to lead, call on those that you can get that are not only experts, but have experience. And there's a lot of very knowledgeable people in this room.
That's why they're here, Mr. Leathers.
There's a lot of experts.
I didn't leave anybody that wasn't an expert out, including yourself. I mean, and as far as landowners being part of it, you're here. I mean, there's nobody not going to have the landowners be part of what we're trying to do here. Now, I go back to those 6 fires too. So, it wasn't, I know you lost more country than I did, but in those 6 fires, right out there where those people were dead, my father-in-law ran the Christie Ranch for 40 years. All 20 sections burned, and I was right in the middle of that whole thing, and I saw the dead people too. So I get it, and it's gone on too long, and that is the purpose of this committee. And I'll tell you, when we caught on fire this time, where this came from, when I found out why we didn't have airplanes, because after 17 fires, we expanded these federal contracts to make sure the Panhandle was always covered. Now, I've learned a lot more about where the failure in communication happened and why we didn't have the aircraft support Texas was paying for. And so we've learned a lot about that in this committee, but the genesis after this fire started, and I spoke with Nim Kidd, and that's when I found out about the airplanes. And I can tell you in the legislative process, and I appreciate you not pointing fingers around here because we can all do it, it just doesn't seem to be very productive. So what I said to Chief Kidd is, what can the legislature do to fix this? I want to know. I'm not saying, and I was plenty mad when I found out we didn't have an airplane in the Texas Panhandle. And he said, I appreciate the way you asked that question. And TDM went to work automatically, and I called Speaker of the Texas House, and I said, this is what we need. He said, absolutely. And that's where this committee came from, because I'm tired of it too. Everybody that's been through it, it's too many times. It's too many times. And Dale, this isn't your first time to go through it. Craig, I know it's not yours. And George, you've been around too. We've all been through it. The purpose, what we're trying to accomplish through this committee process is solutions, right? We all know what happened, and we all know the culprits, and we all know who we're mad at for each part of this. What matters is having a plan going into the 25 session. And I can assure you, landowners won't be left out. Southwest cattle raisers are already involved. Texas cattle feeders are involved. And these hearings are in Pampa, Texas, because the last thing I want involved is bureaucrats. That's why we're here. So as we move forward, solutions are the key. And Mr. Leathers, to your point, we're going to have a full day tomorrow of talking to the PUC, to the Department of Insurance, to the utilities, and try to solve some of those problems. But one of the things I really would like to know from the landowners, going back to anybody know anybody in South Carolina? What I really want to know from you landowners are things like, I do not think it's your responsibility to take care of somebody that comes on your land's infrastructure. But I also have heard lots of testimony about some landowners that frankly just don't take care of their own personal property and cause problems. We've heard a lot about controlled burns, and you've heard me from this microphone. I kind of tend to agree with you and Jason more about the benefit of that. But while we're on the subject of poles, and you got them all over your ranches. You go usually down your fence line. And so, yes, we need new poles, need new infrastructure. But is there an answer for, should the power companies come down there right away and mow between those poles every year? Should we plant these green strips we keep hearing about? Strategic water placement when we do have to fight fires, and I know a lot of ranchers already do that. On my place, I don't have a firefighting water tank there. I just graze my house pasture to the root bed every year, and that's been very useful for me. But those are the kind of things I'm hoping to glean from this panel. You know, what kind of things, Craig, when that fire came through you, what would have been helpful?
Well, you talk about the solutions, and the air support would have been huge. We've talked about that, but I'll tell you my personal experience on that, Chairman King. I was, that Monday night, of course, it's coming through Chambers and McMorty's, and Chambers, I corner with them, so it's getting 3-4 miles west of my property. So I'm up there at 7, 8 that night. I can see the red glow. We're hearing all the reports. It's coming. The wind's terrible. So I'm sitting up there. Cindy's still at home, and I'm getting back with her, and I said, you better pack your car. You better start getting stuff together. It doesn't look good. So that was about 8, 9 o'clock. It was still looking bad. It was still coming closer and closer. Well, about 10 o'clock, the wind started dying down, and the humidity came up. And I'm telling you what, those firefighters, you talk about impressive, they just started mopping it up. And it was like, you see this red glow, it's still 3 or 4 miles away. You see the red glow, and it just starts getting darker and darker. About 10 o'clock, it's dark. They have it out. They put it out. It's amazing. So I go back to the house, I tell my wife, I said, but don't unpack, because we've heard what's going to happen tomorrow. We knew what was coming. The high winds again, west winds, south winds, then turn into the northern 60 mile an hour that next afternoon. So we knew what was coming. So I'm really nervous that night, so I get up every once in a while looking through the window to see if I can see fire, you know. And so finally I just get up 4:30, 5 o'clock. I just drive on up there. I go west on my property, and there's a pickup up there, and it's a Hemphill County pickup, I can tell. And it's dark still, it's 5 o'clock, and I just kind of eased by, and I could tell, I thought, well, I'm not gonna disturb them. They've been here all night, I can tell. They're watching. So I drive on over Quarter Horse Road. You've all heard about Quarter Horse Road. I'm on that Quarter Horse Road. And so, McMorty's, Chambers, it's still quiet. It's still black, it's still dark. The wind's maybe 15 mile an hour. I don't know. It wasn't too bad for around here. It sure wasn't. And I sat there for 3 hours probably, and it started getting light, so I thought, I'm going to go back and see who my guardian angel was up there on the hill on my west side. Well, it was Chief Brewster was in his pickup, and I know he was there all night. And I can't thank those guys enough. It's unbelievable what they did and do. So that was about 8:30, and I pulled up there, and it was Scott. He rolled his window down. He was on the phone. He was fixing to go live on. Chris Samples had called him and was fixing to talk on the radio, live on the radio. So I didn't get to talk to him very much, but I said, Scott, this isn't over, is it? He said, no, it's not. So we all knew that. So I was thinking from like daylight till 10:30, I was going, where's the planes? Mm-hmm. Where are they? I couldn't believe it. The day before, I thought, well, it's too windy. I don't know all about all that stuff, but I thought it was blowing terribly the day before. So I thought, it's the wind is why they're not here. Well, from, daylight to 10:30 or so, and I could see it was still all out, you know. It was still smoking, and the wind was starting to getting up. If they could have came in there, yes, sir, I'm telling you, it would have made a huge difference. I can't say it would have stopped it, but it was unbelievable, the chance and the opportunity they had at that time. If we had planes in Texas or whatever we were talking about earlier.
Well, I think I think, that's one of the things that started the process to get into where we are today is I don't want the federal government deciding when we have wildfires anymore. I mean, it's enough. And Mr. Leathers, I 100% agree with you. Should have done something about it in 06. I mean, and we missed opportunities. We're not going to miss this time. The Governor Abbott sat in Canadian Texas on March 5th and said 3 times in a meeting that he supported the efforts of the Texas House and was ready to sign what we put on his desk. So I have a lot of certainty that we're going to do some good and we're going to make some changes for our volunteer firefighters and that kind of thing. But for you guys and in your ranching operations, the only and this is the best way I know to say it. You think about water, and water's a private property right, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's what Texas law says, and that's how we believe out here. We are about private property rights. I worry somewhat about when we open Pandora's box, and these agencies, Mr. Leather, that you keep talking about, they love new laws when they can come out there and tell us what to do. And so I need to be real careful about how things are crafted to preserve the private property rights that we all aren't going to give up as Texans. So I guess my question is, if any of you have an answer, what are you, working with your county governments, if you don't have strategic water storage on your land, are you willing to do those kind of things? It would be by choice, obviously, but what kind of partnerships do you envision with our state, county, and municipal governments that would help your ranches for sure, but help everybody? I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think I'll take a stab at it, and y'all please jump in there because you have your own individual operations. There's a way, as far as water storage, there's a way that we can come to the table and come up with ways that's not only water storage and availability for fighting fires and for mitigating fires, but also a way that it benefits the ranchers for water for their cattle.
Yeah.
So there's a partnership that can be gained from that. That's win-win for everybody. As far as coming
Mr.
up with...
Are you talking about, we've already talked about the problems with the dirt tanks these days. Are you talking about more of a storage type tanks, or what do you think?
Depending on where you're at. If there's country that's conducive to dirt tanks and they'll hold, absolutely, probably the cheapest way to go. If it's a country that you need water and you're going to have volume, you're going to be looking at tanks.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Metal, poly, whatever the case may be. The solution that we come up with, number one, is not going to be accomplished by arguing and people being passionate and pounding the table and blaming people. There's nothing gained from that. It's going to be calm heads, experienced people, and experts in their field. And it's going to be a combination of everything that's been talked about the last 2 days. There's not any one silver bullet that's going to fix the problem. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take everybody. It's going to take our representatives. It's going to take the landowners. It's going to take the NRCS. And yes, it's going to take the utility companies, and it's going to take some of these oil companies to come up with a reasonable solution so that they can stay in business, we can stay in business, protect the public, and protect our livelihoods as ranchers.
Dale?
There we
There you
go.
go.
In Hemphill County, they installed a overhead tank at our county barn close by us. It was, several thousand gallons, donated by an oilfield company, I believe. Of course, didn't take long for it to spring leaks, and so it's no longer functional. I see for a small landowner like myself, centralized things that could be done with the county would be great. For water storage would be great. Also, the issue of dirt tanks has been solved by the oil field industry by putting in frac tank, plastic line tanks, and there's some of those that are around that are still there. They haven't been covered up because they can't afford to come in and cover them up, I guess. But that might be something to access. I don't know how many of those are available, but those frac tanks did hold water and were very useful for the oil industry. But while I'm thinking about this, I got just one little thing. We've used the term act of God several times today, and I would like to just make a quick statement that is a legal term and has a meaning to it. It's not a theological term, and I could probably talk about that theologically, but we're not going to in this space. But that's something I just wanted to bring up.
Well, I appreciate that clarification.
Oh, and as far as solutions, I don't have any solutions, but I see that you're headed towards some ways of making good decisions and finding some good solutions. And one thing I appreciated what you said earlier was that you're focusing not only on the negatives, but also on the positives, because the danger of just focusing on the negatives gives you tunnel vision. And I think it's important to use that thinking whenever you're making some decisions. Also, doing no harm. I kind of inferred that from what you said just a minute ago, and you know that way better than most. That in trying to find solutions, sometimes unintended consequences happen, and I appreciated you saying that because I feel like you understood that. One thing I haven't heard you talk about is the historical perspective, and I'm talking about historical from maybe this is the biggest fire in the state of Texas since 1845, but I have a suspicion that this is not the biggest fire that this country has ever seen. From a historical perspective, even going back 10,000 years ago, this country's been prone to burn, and we might have mitigated that some in what was probably a terrible idea, was to break out a bunch of this country and try to farm it. But CRP has put a lot of grass back in this country, and in that comes some natural fire breaks that we no longer have.
Well, and that brings up the CRP problem. Brings up something that we keep talking about the federal government, and I know most private property right respecters would just assume the federal government's stay out of our business, but the CRP. Even when we have a fire and there's no place to take cattle, y'all probably have some idea, talking about an act of God to get the federal government to open up CRP for grazing, which is part of another problem, obviously. And I think we're stuck with the drought cycle that we've been in really since 2000 for at least another couple years. I don't have any reason to believe we're not. So, and with our low cattle numbers, CRP, high winds, aging infrastructure, Mr. Leathers, as you pointed out, this is going to continue. This is the biggest fire now, and if we don't get ahead of it, and I'm sure it's a combination of things. When we've talked about mitigation, whether it's prescribed burns, green strips, mechanical, grazing, which I thought Judge Locke did a great job of explaining. If there was a cattle to buy, you couldn't afford them in this market to actually graze. If you wanted to graze it down, like Jason said, in the 70s, whenever people were overgrazing, that's not really an option. But I still go back to these, and listen, I know we talk a lot about the utilities, but we also know statistically the utilities start less of these fires than other things. Once you take the oil field locations out of sparking these up, but I struggle with what do you do with the power poles running down your fence line? There's no way to graze it, and it's like you and your black strip, Mr. Weathers. If you do 400 foot, what if it starts at 405 feet? And so I don't have a good idea. on what type of mitigation should happen underneath power poles. And we're going to talk to the utilities tomorrow, and this is one of the questions that I'm going to bring up a lot because I want to hear their ideas. But you guys, as landowners who have these things all over your properties and down your fence lines, if you don't have an idea, that's fine. I just think it's a good spot for us to talk about and possibly throw some ideas out there that we can throw at the utility companies when we discuss this with them tomorrow. And that's just one part of this, right? I mean, we can talk about anything else you want to, but it's something, given the testimony and the conversations we've had today, that is on the top of my head. Yes, sir, Mr. Weathers.
I'd like to throw a little something in there, and this is a common sense thought. When you got a power line running down a fence line, we do fire guards around the ranch on our outside fences next to highways. And for obvious reasons, if we have a fire that starts on the highway from a dragging chain or whatever the case may be, we have an opportunity. It's always on the inside of our fence. I personally, speaking for the ranch or myself as a private landowner, if somebody wants to come in there and spray and kill that ground right on that fence line, I have no problem with it. And the reason being, if I have a fire come across there, I have a chance of saving my fence. There's common ground that can be had there. It's called common sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a possibility.
Mr. Abraham.
Well, I'm going to run down the line, but one thing on the power lines, me being a helicopter pilot, it'd make me happy if they just buried the damn things. That'd solve everybody's problems, you know? And that's what they're doing in California now, is they're burying the power lines. Dale, you're an expert on fire. I've got fond memories of saving your house, and one of the fonder memories is I was coming out of a dip tank there, which I was in a hover, and I was looking at my speed indicator, and I was indicating 60 knots. So you've seen your fair share of fires.
You know, I'm really glad you brought that up. I was hoping to be able to say something about that. It was in the 2017 fire. And we had fought that fire for 2 hours, hour and a half, and no sign of any help. Everybody was sucked in elsewhere. And we were down to a garden hose at my front door, and we heard this helicopter overhead, and it dumped water on top of our house. And I'll tell you what, I've told you this before, but that feeling of somebody knows we're in trouble was very good that day. Yeah, I appreciate that.
It might have been a little wet and cold, but it felt warm.
Oh man,
and fuzzy.
at that point we needed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then Craig, going back to the morning of the fire, me and you were communicating, and you were like, "Man, where are the planes?" And I'd already been notified. There was Texas had no, or National Forest Service didn't have anything contracted. And so, a lot of that stuff that we're talking about is kind of fighting the snake. But when I go back to Joe, I'm thinking, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think he wants to lead this fight. Let's go to the head of the snake, and let's cut the head of the snake off, and that's go to the problem. And Joe knows where the problem is. I know where the problem is, and that's what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's where we need, we talk about the oil companies or this mom and pa oil companies or whoever, and they got a 5-gallon bucket full of fuses there, and they go, "Well, I don't know. We knew we had a problem. We just didn't want to fix it."
Well, Jason, I'm going to speak for myself, and I'm not representing anybody right now but myself and the ranch. But as landowners and ranchers, we're independent-minded. We pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. We don't ask anybody for help generally. We have people from this fire that's not going to come back into ranching. And for a lack of a better term, they've kicked this passive dog one too many times. And this dog is ready to bite. And we're going to have to combine our efforts to do that.
Okay. George.
I mentioned that I've been in the judge's office for several years before I became a full-time, part-time rancher, I guess. We're talking about the same things we were talking about in 11, 14, 17, and 20 today that we were back then. So it's got to get beyond talking about it, or nothing's ever going to change. The aircraft have been a problem for a long time in more ways than one. A lot of times, well, they can't come, they're somewhere else. Well, they can't come for this reason. The single-seaters won't fly if it's more than 30 miles an hour at the fire site, usually. If you'll talk to those pilots, they'll tell you if it gets above 20, their accuracy when they dump it's a waste of time to even be there. That's where you need to be thinking about more helicopters instead of the single-seat fixed wings. Talk to Jason and Trey, and they're not the only ones that can do it, but they're about as good as anybody that you'll ever see do it. He's dumped on our same house twice in the last 10 years and saved one of them out at the ranch, so I know he's good at it. So those things were here, and I don't know what the answer is. And when they get here, you'll be wondering, well, where'd the airplane go? Well, they had to go back to Childress to fill up, or they had to go to Amarillo to fill up. So we put a tank in, as you remember, after 17 at Canadian. I don't think it's been used since then. Apparently it hadn't been certified, whatever that means, to certify a tank you fill with water. I have no clue, but they didn't show up this time at Canadian. So, that's getting back to somebody's dropped the ball somewhere there. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said about it. If you had some of those big tankers come in Tuesday morning, it used to be Tuesday morning, probably could have solved a lot of these problems. Going back to the dozers and the Forest Service, same thing. We've had these conversations for 14 years, 13 years that I know about. I'd always hear from Jason and several other ones like that. Well, they tear everything up. Well, we understand that. You would think that maybe by now somebody would say maybe we need to change the equipment that they're coming up here with. The dozers don't do any good during the fire, and that's when we need all hands on deck. We can hire somebody to go clean up the mess 2 or 3 days later. We need people that can do something that day, right then, that can get here within 5 hours or something so they can be of help. Maybe they need to be using motor graders. Maybe they need some of those tank things, firefighting equipment on tracks. They have track vehicles that have firefighting equipment on them. And they don't need to be the ones that were in World War II that crap out before they ever get out of the yard every time. They build new ones. Maybe that's something that they need to be doing at the Forest Service. Nobody wants to change because they've been using dozers for 20 years. That would be something that, if you really want something that helps, look at those things.
Well, George, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with you, and I think even the Forest Service, and something I mentioned yesterday when we had Forest Service up here, and I don't know if all y'all weren't here yesterday, I don't think, but one of the things that was talked about from the Forest Service is they have 36 Forest Service firefighters in the Panhandle. And what we suggested to them, and I suggested to them, was, well, instead of talking about how you can pay for 1/10 of our volunteer firefighter training, how about you send your 36 to get on the front of that bumper on the next fire and take some training from our guys? Because, Mr. Leathers, if you want to talk about rebuilding trust, being in it and eating that smoke with those guys and not shutting down for 48 hours, I would suggest that'd earn more trust than just about anything.
I had that thought too. That lies under education, and I think maybe if the Forestry Service folks had a little bit of education on Prairie Service instead of Forestry Service, that might help. Their DNA goes back to a place that is different from what we have, the conditions we have here.
I believe that, Dale, 100%. But I do think where we're at with the Forest Service, Director Davis is back there. He stayed the last 2 days. He's going to be here again tomorrow. I'm taking him at his word. He's committed to healing these relationships. He's listening. He wants to. If you haven't met him, I wish you would. I have no reason not to give Director Davis a chance to fix old sins until he proves us wrong, and I don't think he will. So but healing, this trust, Mr. Leathers, it is part of this communication problem we've got to fix, and I don't know how you legislate good behavior, but I do believe if we brought the Forest Service out to train with our guys, and then at the same time we fund our volunteer fire departments in an adequate way where the trucks aren't breaking down while they're leaving the yard and they actually have tires and all that good stuff. We're a long ways down the road on fighting the next one, and we know it's coming. But the airplanes airplanes or helicopters is a resounding, it's what's kept every panel together so far. It's like, if we'd had that air support on Monday when this cranked up, and even Tuesday morning when we had a little calm space, we could have got a lot further.
I got one. Yeah.
Can I
So-
say something right quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Chairman King, you talk about solutions and responsibilities. So, as a landowner and rancher, I feel like the country that we're talking about here, Chambers, McMorty's, Jason, the brush control would be huge, and the cedars is the main culprit. And in our area, the rough areas, I could see the fire for safety reasons. If we can get a handle on the cedars, just driving across there, I know they have to go around different things, and you can't even see the terrain lots of times, how it moves or how it drops, and especially at night, you sure wouldn't. So the safety issue for them would even be huge, plus the beneficial of the landowner getting rid of your cedars. And FSA, they have some good programs and cost sharing programs, and for me, I feel like as a rancher, it's my responsibility to take advantage of that and try to clean some of that up, and that because it's a huge fire hazard.
Absolutely.
Can I add something here? When we're on the ground fighting these fires, and I send a truck out, I'm going to give two examples. In 2011, we were fighting a fire at Dixon Creek, and my guys had our fire truck, and they were out, and the wind changed directions, and the fire was about to overtake them, and a lot of smoke, and they instantly tried to turn around and get back to a safe zone. And when they did, they couldn't see, number one, because of the wind direction had changed, and they backed in and over a concrete pad that was there for a pump jack and hung up. And the fire overtook them, and the guys on the back of the truck started spraying each other, and luckily they weren't burned or harmed. And then I send guys out with our maintainer, or the county shows up and they've got their maintainers out there, and they're blading fire guards, especially in the day and the night. And they come up on flow lines, pipelines that's run on top of the ground. They have no idea if it's a high pressure line, not a high pressure line, what's in the line. If they cut it, they're putting their lives at risk. If they pick up and go over it, they're leaving a break in the fire line for the fire to continue on. There needs to be some talk about cleanup.
I agree.
Yeah, your country, that's we don't have that problem in our country. We learn from y'all. So, but one thing I did want to make Director Davis did catch me out back, and he did promise that there'd never be a dozer again, and he's got about 10 or 11 road graders, right? You nodding your head or no? And 7. He's holding his fingers up 7. And then you also did the promise to be a moving target on the shooting range, and he got thumbs up on that. So there we go.
Well, members, y'all got further questions for this panel? No. Thank y'all so much for participating.
I had one other thing I
Yes,
wanted to bring
ma'am.
up and
Yeah,
throw in
yes,
your
sir.
bucket of communication. That won't take long. One of the things I found really valuable to me on the day of this fire, it was a 2-day event, so that was the bad thing about it. But the good thing about it was a 2-day event, and it gave us some time to plan. I used the Oklahoma Mesonet infrared satellite, real-time fire tracking. Kind of hard to find. If it hadn't been pointed out to me, I wouldn't have been able to find it. I don't know if y'all have that in Texas, the state or the land grant colleges or whoever, but I haven't ever heard anything about that from a landowner position of yeah, you can go and use this tool to help you see what's coming, what direction it's headed, and it helped me make some decisions that day.
Great. Well, we're going to make a note of that and see if we can figure out exactly what
Chairman,
that
can I have a few pictures? Would you like to, do we have time to look at them right
Sure.
quick? This is one cottonwood we were talking about earlier, how you can replace a cottonwood, which you can't. This is, I call it a double barrel cottonwood. This is a before. Next picture will be after. Next picture, well, you can scroll down. So there's hundreds of these, and you can keep going down. Hundreds of these cottonwoods, and I'm not the only one. And then this was some big blue stem that was grown last year. It's like 7 foot tall. And you talk about prescribed burning. You could not hold a gun to my head and make me burn that. Here's the next picture, the very same picture where it's all gone now. You can keep going down. This is my neighbors. I helped him. This was not a fun task. We did this for 4 days. You can keep going. This was his mama cows. We're burying them. You can keep going. The baby calves I threw in my bucket. You can keep going. It was not a pleasant task. This was, oh, it's kind of blown up, but that's the end picture. It was just, I wanted to end on a good picture, so that's a pretty sunset.
I appreciate your positivity. Thank y'all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you. All right. We're going to jump to panel 4. Chair calls Blair Johnson, Clay Reed, Jeffrey Soka, Corey Castillo. That's it. All right. They're going first. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read everybody in. Okay. These two? Okay. Then we'll read these two in. These two, what about this one?
And then you could read them in
Okay. Okay. First of all, we have Clay Reed, Senior Director of Hazmat Safety with Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway. I know you guys have to get out of here, so I'm just going to read you two in, and then y'all can go after we're done, and then we'll get to you, okay? Jeffrey Sokup?
Sokup, you did good.
Sokup?
Yes, sir.
Okay. BNSF Railway.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay. All right. First thing I want to talk about with you guys, and why I asked you to come here, I want to talk about, there was a day, I want to talk about a little railroad technology first. So there was, back in my youth, it was always the train that started the fire. It was always down the right of way, you know, and for some reason, trains don't start fires anymore. Can any of you expound on what has Burlington Northern Santa Fe, or as a rail company, done to mitigate your fire risk?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. First of all, so really, vegetation control plans have been ramped up in the more recent years of my 22 years with BNSF Railway. We have designated plans for vegetations at bridges that we maintain and make sure they're mowed to a specific standard, usually right-of-way dimensions plus 200 feet each side of the bridge. We also run vegetation control trains now that are actually big tank units of vegetation control for weeds and anything that might grow and become a combustible on the right-of-ways.
So how far out do you control from the rail bed? Does it spray out to
it's got a wide spray pattern.
Your rock?
Yeah, so it goes further than that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can get out 25, 50 feet.
On each side?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
go
sir.
ahead.
Yeah, so those are kind of the big implement things that we do now to help control the combustibles along the right of way. Then, of course, trial and error and learning from your processes. We have certain things we can and can't do and certain mile-an-hour winds when it comes to our track repairs, like welding, for example. We can't do any kind of hot work when it's 30 miles an hour or greater. So just kind of learning from your past processes and improving those things there. So those are just a few examples, I think.
What about the sparks coming off the drivers?
Off the trains themselves? Yeah. I think that those are going to be, there, right? We have hot journal detectors now that'll pick up hot wheels. And I couldn't give you the total that we have, but I know that compared to the other Class 1 railroads, we're very aggressive about where we put ours, and probably best in class on having the most on our systems. So that helps a ton. The mitigation of the combustibles with our vegetation controls, our mowing our right-of-ways, our taking care of vegetation around bridges, I think is even more key of why you're not seeing that.
As a company, just in Texas, do you have a sense of what you spend on vegetation control, or what do you spend to prevent fires?
I honestly,
do you have any idea?
I could not tell you that I couldn't quantify the dollar amount without going to the Fort Worth. Certainly, it's in the millions for sure.
But certainly, Burlington Northern and Santa Fe believes it's money well spent.
Absolutely. We actually have specific cost control numbers we assign to the tasks we do, and we have a vegetation control task that we put on our crews that work with each of the supervisors' territories. So that way you can quantify and it goes into that budgeting bucket, and we know how much we need to budget for, where do we need to ramp it up, what other tools and supplies do we need. For example, in my territory alone, we have 8 roadmasters on the Kansas West Division. The roadmasters are who take care of the maintenance for the tracks, and each one of those guys have a rented weed mower, and they have skid steers with mower decks on them. That way we can help with vegetation control, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I've got another question or two for you, but I'm going to ask the committee if they have anything specifically for the railroad.
I do.
Yes, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, no, I've got a lot of the railroad's money from y'all burning me up over the years, and I take every opportunity to stick it to you because I didn't get to when you came through 150 years ago. So, no, but at the same time, I want to. Y'all are the perfect example of somebody who really set a lot of freaking fires, but you fixed your dang problem. Because you rarely ever see many fires come off of your tracks on us like you used to. It was no big deal for y'all to come through on a dry day and set 13 fires, through the ranch. And I remember, when I started the Hoover Fire Department in 1992, that was because we were on the tracks and we were busy putting y'all's fires out. And y'all paid pretty good because, there was nobody else that started 13 fires. It was y'all. But, this is leading into where we're going. You fixed the problem. What'd you do? You put your thermal detectors up. You found the hot bearings. You shut these trains down immediately as soon as you see these hot bearings. I think of the 7 big fires we've had, only one of them's been started by y'all. The other 6 has been started by utilities, right? So whenever we're talking to the utility companies, we need to point to these guys and say, these guys used to be the culprits, but they fixed their dang problem. And I'll testify to that.
And that's why I had them here.
Yeah, and your tracks, believe me, I cuss you daily, hourly. I cuss you all the time. You go right through the middle of my freaking ranch. You block my tracks. You do everything to piss me off. But I'm going to give you that.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that.
You quit burning me up, and I appreciate
that.
Yeah.
So, members, anybody else got a question? I've got one more topic I want to discuss. The railroad bridge in Canadian.
Yes, sir.
and I would be remiss if I didn't tell you in public on the record, if you ever block that Glacier crossing again and Charlie Coffee calls me, I'm bringing Mr. Coffee to meet you. I just want you to know that. And if you haven't met him, you're going to. So don't block the Glacier crossing anymore. But in the last instance when it was blocked, your bridge was on fire.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a damage estimate that you can share with us so far on structural?
I don't have a total estimate yet, and that is my bridge. That is my responsibility. I rebuilt that bridge. Took us about 4 days to get that thing put back in service, day and night. Worked hard. I've 22 years. I've probably worked 8 bridge fires, several wildfires have turned into tie fires, and this was probably one of the most difficult, catastrophic fires I've ever seen. With the length, right. We went from Glacier to Mendota, right. It was long, and we lost that bridge there. Unfortunately, right now I do not have a total. Right, we still have invoices coming in. We have contractor costs coming in. We have a lot of intangibles that I can't estimate for with an emergency like that. That is something that BNSF will provide to the panel. Yes, sir.
That would be great if
Yes,
you
sir.
could just tell us just a hard cost of the dollar number of damage that was done with the fire, and then I'm sure you will have it at some point. But you were 4 days getting those trains across just a little at a time and stuff while you were doing your inspections and stuff. You have to have a figure of lost commerce.
Yeah. So once again, I'm the bridge guy, right? I'm not the what happens when we stop trains guy. But that's another thing that I will bring back to BNSF and promise to get that what was the economic effect of having all the trains. The tracks that go through Canadian Texas, through Pampa, and I might say what an unusual situation when you got to evacuate towns from Fargo, Oklahoma, all the way to Panhandle, Texas. What a crazy situation. And our tracks go through there, right? And the men and women that work for me included, we have friends, we have family that we're evacuating, my mother included, in Miami, Texas. Okay? But they're still going to work. They're still trying to put the infrastructure back so we can move trains. So I promise you, committee, we will get those numbers for you through BNSF. And you're pretty close, 4 days. We were 30 hours, no traffic on either main. 30 hours, no traffic on either main. And the Transcontinental Southern Railroad goes from Los Angeles, California to Chicago, Illinois, and all your Amazon packages, anything that UPS touches, anything that FedEx delivers, anything you see at Walmart touches those railroad tracks through Canadian Texas, right? So there is a big loss there. I wish I could quantify it for you, but I cannot right now.
If you can just get that information to the committee, we've talked a lot about costs and hidden costs, and I certainly didn't want to leave commerce out, and obviously we had a lot of 18-wheelers that go down 83 too that stopped, and certainly Highway 60 and 70 and all the rest of them. But the railroad, with your specific problem with the bridge catching fire and the inspection process, do you know when you got into the inspection process, was it major repair or?
Yes, sir. So we replaced 220 feet of that bridge. So this bridge, it's masonry piers, right? So concrete piers basically, steel beams, and then wood decks that go across the top, and that's what holds the rock and the ballast and the ties and the rail, right? Or the wooden tubs on top of the steel. So the steel and the concrete, that was fine. We lost the wooden tubs is what caught fire and burned. 220 feet is what we repaired. So we were down both main tracks for 30 hours. Got main 1, which is the big concrete bridge you're well aware of. That one was not harmed. Nothing with that. It was the timber deck bridge on main 2, which is closest to the walkway bridge, the historical walkway bridge. And then from there, we were down for 4 days, got it back in service. So we were out of service on Tuesday about 1600. And then we were back in service, ran first train about 0200 Saturday.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I know you guys got to catch a flight. I could
Thank you.
sit here and badger you with more of this stuff, but those were really the two things I had for you. Members, any questions before our friends from Burlington North Santa Fe? Mr. Avery.
Just for giggles, I'm not won't hold you to it. So whenever the grain elevator was leaning over Canadian over the tracks, we were looking at buying that and removing it. And at that time, we were told then that if it falls across the tracks, it's $1 million a minute.
Million?
That was 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
$1 million a minute. Is that anything close to it?
And I don't know about all that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That, you know,
That's a lot. It was a lot.
yeah, it may have increased. I don't know. There's inflation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But when you
I don't
get
know.
when you get the facts,
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
we want the facts.
Absolutely. We'll get them for you.
Thank you
Yep,
very
thank
much.
y'all.
I hope you
Appreciate
catch
y'all's
your
time.
flight. Thanks
Yep.
for hanging
Yeah,
out.
thank you.
We're moving at the speed of smell. So thank you. Okay. Next we have Blair Johnson with TxDOT. There's Blair. Yeah. We got Corey Castillo, Texas Comptroller. Okay. I'll sign these. Members, do y'all have a question? You want to start with one or the other, or do you have any questions for them? I've got a couple. All right. Corey, let's start with you. Let's talk about broadband infrastructure for rural areas and the money that's at the comptroller's office and where that's at in getting to places like this.
Sure. We have several funding sources and they all have different timelines on them. The first one that is currently available and in the process of awarding is what we call our BOOT program. It's a Bringing Online Opportunities to Texas. It's a federally funded program through the CPF funds, the Cronus funds. We have awards right now that we're finalizing. We expect an announcement likely in May on the awards that come out of that first tranche of funding. It is only a portion of the funding because we wanted to make sure that we were identifying ways to improve the program through that first funding that went through the broadband office. The broadband office is a relatively new office.
Right. So is this a matching fund?
No, this fund is a fund that is going to be a full funded program. There's another federal program, the BEAD program, that's through the Infrastructure Act. That does have a local match requirement, but we do have another state fund bucket, the Broadband Infrastructure Fund, that we intend to use to help with that local match.
Are we in any danger of losing the federal funds for being late on our match?
No, we are not. On the CPF funds, we have until the end of 2026 to spend those funds, and we're on track to do that. There's a couple other programs under there. The bulk of that money is going for broadband infrastructure last mile build out, which is what this program is. I did ask our team to give me, again, these aren't awarded, so this isn't a sure deal, but active applications in this area. Several counties in this Panhandle region do have active applications. I have the list here. Cochran, Donnelly, Floyd, Garza, Hall, Hockley, Hutchison, Lubbock, Randall, Terry, and Yoakum. Now these are applications by internet service providers saying that they have the ability to come out and build out in these areas, requesting funding from our office to support that build out. There are all the areas, all the counties do have eligible locations for additional build out, other through either this BOOT program, which has additional funding in it. We also have large other buckets of money that will be available in the future. The biggest one of that is the BEAD program.
So the first pot of money that would get pushed out to our area, how much is in that pot?
It's a total of about 437 million, 438. We have about 37 million that appears to be funded through this first round. So there's going to be an additional 400 million available in that first bucket of money that we have.
So can you give us some idea of a time frame? I know I've talked to the comptroller about it many times, and I know between the federal hoops and making sure the money's getting spent the right way and all, it's slowed the process down, and you have a new office. But just ballpark.
Sure. So this first batch of money, which is not the largest amount, but that 37 million, we are in the finalizing stage of awarding those. We expect that we would be able to announce those awards in May. This May.
Okay.
The remaining amount of that money becomes more complicated because we're also dealing with an influx of federal funds, the $3.3 billion through the BEAD program, and we need to make sure we're not overbuilding or somehow spending money in both the same areas, and that has a very limited time frame for awarding. That program, the money on that BEAD program, that 3.3, likely won't hit the streets until 2025 because we have a 365-day application window with the federal government. So there's going to be a rolling funding for broadband infrastructure support between these different buckets of money. I did want to point out in the Broadband Infrastructure Fund, which was some historic investment that the legislature made at the state level, $1.5 billion that was voted on in the November election, has some flexibility in the way that money is spent. And I did mention we believe the majority of that money will be used to help local communities meet that matching requirement to get the federal funds for the BEAD program. There's $75 million of that have been appropriated by the legislature to a pole replacement program. So the pole replacement program has been in statute for 2 sessions. It was originally going to be funded with coronavirus money. The feds didn't want to fund it, so now it's being funded by state money. Again, it's $75 million. And so that would be an opportunity that if there is aging infrastructure on the poles that require upgrades in order to connect broadband infrastructure to them, that there's a 50, it's basically like a cost sharing. The ISPs will pay for it and the state will reimburse for a portion of that cost. And that program has a rule package out right now, updated, open for public comment I think this Friday. We have 30 days, but we anticipate that funding should be out available on the street in midsummer. And that's another $75 million specifically for pole replacement. Again, to ISPs to help them to reimburse them for the cost for upgrading the poles.
All right. Members, anybody got a question for our comptroller witness?
I will mention, I
Please
also am over the Property Tax Assistance Division, so I'm happy to answer questions about the property tax exemption.
Oh, great.
I'm also over the Senate Bill 22 if you have any questions about that rule of law enforcement.
Oh, well, you're going to be here a while.
But I'm also happy to share information with the committee after.
Yeah, walk us through the property tax exemption.
Yeah, so the property tax exemption, I brought it up because I wanted to make sure it was on the record. There is a timeline by which you have to apply, and it's 105 days from the date the disaster was declared. So we're still within that time frame, but if a property was damaged, it has to hit a 15% of damage to even qualify. But there's tiers on the level of damage and the amount of exemption that's available. But you do have to apply for it, and you go to your local chief appraiser to go through that process. It's 15%, 30%, 60%, and 100% damage. There's also some other options under that section of code that allow for installment payments for property taxes. So again, if you were damaged by a natural disaster, and you're unable to pay your property taxes, you can take advantage of installment payments specifically for that. And for small businesses as well. So there's a threshold based on income for those small businesses, ability to change that. I will note that property taxes, your tax assessment is of January 1 of that year. So they're looking at this fall, when they get their bills, it's going to be based on the value as of January 1. So it is not taking into account anything that was lost due to the disaster, because it was what was on the ground as of January 1, and that's by law the way that properties are assessed here in Texas. So the true, as the judge had mentioned, a chief appraiser probably has an idea of what has happened, but they can't change the roll to be that lower value because it is as of January 1. They may be able to help with the kind of value loss based on the disaster exemption files that was what has been filed, but it'll probably be more noticeable on the 2025 rolls when it's as of January 1 there, what the values look like on the roll. I also want to mention a question came up to the judges about their tax rate setting process. There is provisions in the tax rate setting process to assist school districts, counties, cities who have gone through a disaster to work through recovering disaster costs. And I know Chairman Burrows, it was part of that, the historic bill that put some of that language in the truth in taxation process to allow them to account for disasters. It includes allowing them to temporarily increase their threshold on tax rates to increase their revenue, but they have to back out eventually because it's only to help them in that recovery period, not increase the tax base long term. But we're happy to work with any of the judges in this area, can contact our office so we can assist them. Their chief appraisers, their tax assessor collectors can also assist.
Okay, so on the for the counties, and you would work, the comptroller's office would work directly with the tax assessor collector or the judge. But for the private citizen, they need to go through their chief appraiser.
If a private citizen has damages to their physical property or income-producing property, they can go to the chief appraiser to find out what they need to provide in order to apply for that exemption and receive that exemption.
Okay. Chairman Burrows.
I'll just say this. You heard the same comment I did, that I think one of the judges said the caps apply. It's not really a cap, of course, the voter approval rate, but because of the disaster loophole that exists under this, is actually not going to be there.
Right.
So that was the comment I think that you picked up on. I did as well, but that clarifies it.
Yes, and there's a provision in there, again, this goes with the tax rate setting process, that they don't have to go to an election in order to raise their tax rate in the year in which a disaster's occurred. So this would be the year, come the fall time period when everyone's setting their budgets, that option is available to those communities.
Thank you. Excellent. Ms. Draper.
Did you say 1 year, 2 years relief?
For the property tax
Yes,
exemption,
ma'am.
it is, I believe it's 1 year. I kind of really quickly pulled all that information together, but I'm happy to confirm that for the committee.
That'd be.
I think the letter I saw, it was for 1 year.
Yeah.
Because at that point in time, the new valuations will actually include the damage. If it extends beyond that, it'll get captured in there.
Correct.
There's
And-
also de minimis exceptions and other things that probably take care of all of this.
Yes, and another good point is if someone who has lost property has to rebuild, there are also protections in the law against your homestead appraisal cap, not moving just because you've had to replace a structure, unless of course you're building a much different structure. There's also protections for over 65 homeowners who had a ceiling on their previous property and it was lost due to a disaster. So there's a lot of provisions as it relates to property tax to help protect property owners from property tax costs.
Excellent. Excellent. Members, further questions for Ms. Castillo? That's great information. I know it was a long ways for a short amount of time, but I can see so many heads out there going, okay, now I get it. So I really appreciate you coming up.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much. All right. We're down to Blair Johnson. Hi, Blair. We want to talk about 1927. No, I'm not kidding. I'm kidding. We're not talking about 1927 today. So, if we had some other members from Hemphill and Lipscomb County, some other residents here, we would be talking about that. But today, what I actually wanted TxDOT to be here for is to talk about fire mitigation, bar ditch vegetation control, that type of thing. I know we contract mowers. They come through about once a year. But you've probably heard a lot of the testimony today and a lot of the questions about, you got power lines running down a fence line. So if the power company comes in and treats under the power pole, but right next to it is the bar ditch that's this high. What should we do about that? And then the other thing is, I've heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, you tell me, but I've been told that TxDOT actually doesn't want to burn bar ditches because of erosion. Is there any truth in that?
So on your first question, as far as what is our vegetation plan, so we mow twice a year, and in our rural areas. Urban areas, sometimes the city pays for it. We typically mow 3 times in an urban area. But as far as the rural areas go, We try to hit it in July and then after the first freeze. That's our mowing program, but we also have a herbicide program as well. We've got our own herbicide operators. We try to hit it, early spring, try to keep the weeds down as best we can. So both of those, and then we've also got, dead tree removal, that type of stuff. All that is our basic vegetation program. Currently, we are working with Hutchinson County on your second question. We're working with them, and it's actually at our general counsel right now on an agreement to do some prescribed berms in targeted locations. And so I don't think TxDOT is against any of this, especially, when it makes sense at the right time of year. I think we're ready to be a partner wherever we can be. When you look at our whole entire mowing program, typically we get about $38 an acre for contract mow. Each cycle costs about $1.2 million, averages out to about $70,000 a county. And we do set up every contract with additional acres that go beyond, just our 30-foot mow that we do on each side of the road. So we do set up additional acres that the supervisor in that county can use those additional acres to catch some areas if we're getting really high near the fence line.
Okay. Was there, so in this district, we talked to the railroad about damage to the railroad bridge. Did TxDOT see damage to infrastructure and highways?
Yes, sir. It was mainly just signs, delineation, and guardrail. Of course, Thursday we were out and we were doing our damage assessments, checking our bridges. We've identified about $400,000 worth of losses across our system, across those 4 counties. I do expect additional costs because we will have some trees that have died that we'll have to go take down, and that will continue to drive the cost up. I guess another cost that we've currently got is we're helping Hutchinson County with debris removal. We're just moved into Fridge and Stinnett. I think yesterday we hauled about 6,500 cubic yards just to the recycle site, and we'd probably haul another 6,000 today and hopefully get Fridge and Stinnett cleaned up. So that's about the extent of our costs.
Okay. I'm assuming you're tracking that cost.
Yes, sir.
That on whatever was associated with the fire.
Yes, sir.
Will you be able to share that when you get a number with the committee, and
Yes, sir.
and possibly have it broke down into whether it's sign replacement or guardrails or debris haul?
We sure can.
That'd be great. Members, any other questions for TxDOT? Oh, hang on a second. Okay. And you helped with evacuations.
Yes, sir. Of course, our response on the fires is we basically try to assist our local partners, and we provide traffic control, fuel. We've even provided water before if we have to. Of course, we don't have a whole lot of water trucks, but we can help with that as well.
Great. And so were you operating in all the counties that were involved in the fire at the same time?
Yes, sir.
So, and so we've talked a lot about the maintainers and our county road gangs and stuff, and we have county guys. Were the TxDOT employees involved in that as well?
So we did not operate any maintainers in this fire. We provided traffic control. I think some of the things that, of course, we didn't get a request to assist either. We typically have about 2 maintainers in each county. In our district we do, and that's typically for snow response. Most of our guys, we're willing to assist, and we have this year actually gone out there and cut a fire break out in front of the fire. We typically stay a mile or 2 out in front of the fire, or we're working in the black when we assist.
Okay, but if a fire department called and you do have the ability to assist with a maintainer.
Correct. We do run that through our administration for approval. Once we get that STAR request from the county, we do run that through the administration for approval, and if it's a location that we think we can get to provide a service, then we will.
Okay, and just to follow up, what's the newest maintainer you have? Are you fighting with EPA regulations as well?
So we did get a good round of newer maintainers. We've actually got a couple in this year. They're probably a 22 model. But basically every county's got one that's 2018 to 2022, and maybe a little older, maybe 2016 to 2022. And then we've got one that's probably a 1995 model.
It's probably the one that runs the best.
That's exactly right.
So I'm just curious, and I know this isn't really a question you can answer, but as many state agencies as we've had come up here, and it's been an ongoing theme about the emission standards and the equipment not running. I would think a state as big as Texas would, even though it's a federal standard, would have enough sway with the manufacturers to get a deleting kit on certain equipment. You think?
You think the military can do it? Surely Texas can do it in about half a day.
Yeah. I'm not sure our governor's all that popular with the administration, but we can work on that. Anyway, all right, Blair, Corey, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank y'all.
Okay. All right, we have Jason Whistler, City of Borger Emergency Management. Is Jason still with us? Oh, there he is. Great. We have Cal Ferguson, owner 4F Outfitter, representing 4F Outfitter and himself. We have Thomas Lansford, Assistant State Vet, Texas Animal Health Commission. We have Holly Teachin-Hale, Texas Animal Health Commission. Yeah. Did I get all of that right for each one of you? Did I get an affirmative in the yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much. So you're all read into the record. Anybody want to start? Anybody got a question for this panel?
Mr. Jason Whistler, I do have a presentation.
Please do.
Probably a little bit of a lengthy introduction. If you'd like to circle back to me in a little bit.
It didn't sound like we got questions yet. So, how lengthy is it?
Pardon me?
How lengthy is it?
I'll go as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and I'm not going to start
I
the
want
slides just yet.
I want to see your presentation. I want to hear what you have to say. So please proceed.
So, before I introduce myself too much more, I wanted to bring up one incident that happened. It was on March 5th, 2024. We'd already been fighting the fires for about a week, and we get a call to a structure fire up in the city of Fridge. It ended up being the fire where Chief Smith ended up perishing. I responded to that scene. The firefighters that were present on that structure fire call: Grand Prairie Fire Department, DeSoto, Red Oak, Brownwood Fire Department, led by a task force leader out of Fort Worth. These are the people that responded to that fire, the only fire department agencies that responded on that house fire, retrieved Chief Smith and tried to revive him. And it was a very tough moment. But when we talk about TIFMAS, I want to bring up the fact that they're not just here to help us fight our fires, they're here to help save us also. And we owe them a huge amount of respect. And I'm very appreciative of what they did out there. That was a tough moment. Actually, I had to have them hold that scene until we get the State Fire Marshal's office in to complete a line of duty death. And honestly, I went and sat on the back of that DeSoto truck and I just cried. And I had hands of strangers I didn't know come up and supporting me. And I don't know these people, but they were there for me. So, huge respect for the TIFMAS teams that were up here. They did the best they could, so
Great to hear.
I just wanted to do a prelude with that. Real quick, my name is Jason Whistler. I'm with the City Board of Emergency Management. Also with the work with the Hutchinson County Emergency Management Office, Hutchinson County Fire Marshal's Office. I've been in public safety for over 30 years, almost 25 years with the City Board, or the last 9 years in emergency management. Currently hold a Master Peace Officer license, advanced license as a state arson fire investigator. I'm also a licensed burn manager with the Department of Agriculture, certified instructor for wildfire home assessments through the National Volunteer Fire Council and the U.S. Forest Service. Previously, I've also held certifications with the NWCG as a firing boss and a wildland fire investigator, and I've worked with the National Park Service. Certified wildfire mitigation specialist through the National Fire Protection Agency. Not that I like all things fire, but in our environment in the Texas Panhandle, we average 70 to 90 wildfires a year in our jurisdiction. That's our biggest threat, and so that's what I feel as emergency manager I have to focus on. Real quick, the day of the fires, we'd activated our EOC in advance. We knew the fires were going to be bad. Myself, my county counterparts, my assistant emergency management coordinator, and we had other resources staffed up in our EOC. We were monitoring radar, talking with the National Weather Service. We were pretty abreast on what was going on. We also had previous discussions and figured it was probably going to be bad. The fuel loading may not have been as tall as we've seen historically, but we knew it was pretty dang continuous. We knew that once we did have these fires, they may not be quite as intense, but we figured that they would be a lot harder to get in front of. A lot of times we rely on those variables, those areas that have been maybe overgrazed or some other issues that help us. We've got some areas with buffalo that actually help us out a lot with the wildfires. But once the first fire started, the North County Road O fire, which was later renamed to the Smokehouse Fire, once that one started, and then of course we had the cascading events, also monitoring the Windy Deuce fire that was still over in Moore County, Potter County area that we were watching. We also had the Reamer 687 fire that broke loose, which ended up going into the smokehouse. We had another fire. I think we ended up with about 13 fires within that 2-day period in Hudson County, several of them complexed into the other smokehouse or some of the other fires. It's a pretty crazy day. One of the first resources to arrive on scene down in our city hall, down in our emergency operations center, was TDM. And for those first few days, they were working 24-hour shifts with us. The TDM crew came in waves. They were a very strong force, and I really want to compliment their efforts of what they did. TDM force consisted of the Incident Support Task Force, the ISTF, which sometimes includes emergency managers from other counties. We had emergency managers from Pasadena that came all the way up here, and that's a pretty long ways. And the beauty of that program I like is those are people who have dealt with their own local disasters, and they bring a lot of knowledge to the plate. They're a good resource for us to be able to talk to and bounce ideas off of. We also had the county liaison officers from various jurisdictions that came up, and like I said, they were a huge force multiplier. In our EOC, we had representatives from TDM, state and local ag resources, Red Cross, XL Energy, Texar, Search and Rescue, and other volunteer organizations. It was a very quick and efficient way to communicate with everything that was going on and with literally the overwhelming situation that we were dealing with. Again, I just cannot understate the level of coordination that we had in there. I do think it's very important to understand that one thing, there will be more fires than there are firemen, and we've seen that, and this has happened before. A lot of people don't like to hear that. You think of the average house fire, maybe get 3 engines show up, a dozen firefighters, that's for one house fire. We're talking hundreds of house fires. This will happen again. This is going to lead into the fire mitigation and fire resiliency and firewise aspect of it. The ugly truth is that homes are going to have to be prepared to be self-sufficient and to be able to withstand the fire. I think that's part of living with wildfire. We have to live with fire. Just prior to the fires, we'd been working on our community wildfire risk assessments, our community wildfire protection plan. We just recently renewed our firewise status with the city of Borger. We had actually been coordinating with Team Rubicon, who would actually come out and do mitigation work and limb up trees and do things on private property with landowners' consent. There's a lot of resources out there and a lot of people that want to come in and help do things in our communities. Team Rubicon's actually been up before and helped out in Scotts Acres. And we were actually planning on getting them coming up again literally weeks before the fire started. We were trying to identify areas. Unfortunately, some of those areas were areas that we did lose in Sage Mesa and Arroyo Verde community, just south of Fritch. Last year, we also began talking with TxDOT about doing some prescribed fire on right-of-ways, specifically along 207. It's something that's not commonly practiced. It's unusual, and we're doing it at very select sites for very specific reasons. One of them, and you guys in the eastern part of the Panhandle totally understand this, the terrain influence on large wildfires cannot be understated. When you have that heavy terrain, it's hard to get to those fires, and that's normally where the big fires are. We've identified areas around Dixon Creek east of 207 that have been responsible for many wildfires that have threatened the cities of Skellytown and it ran all the way up into Pampa. We've made a lot of progress with TxDOT, and I want to really reemphasize this isn't a reactive thing to the fire. We'd been working on this with TxDOT prior to. It's not always been pretty. It's not been easy. There's been some kicking and screaming, but we made a lot of progress. And I think we're at a point to where we're about to start trying to implement that on some test bases. That project actually includes cooperation with the 4-6's Ranch, Crutch Ranch, and we're working on some other projects. I believe Derek Holdstock mentioned putting in some mitigation areas, putting in some defensible spaces, so to speak, somewhere on the ranch lands, and we've been working with multiple jurisdictions about doing that also. And so we've had a lot of effort and we've had a lot of momentum moving forward up to the fires. And this obviously is just going to help motivate and try to fast track those a little bit. Just got a couple of things on the slides on the wildfires. There's very few slides and they're all pictures, so I don't have any words for them. So I'm going to narrate for you guys. Next slide. This is from the Texas Forest Service, the TxRAP map. Texas Panhandle, you can see the Canadian River. We can see where the terrain is. It's just a typical topography of the Texas Panhandle. Next slide. This is not updated enough to show the Windy Deuce or the Smokehouse, but something I want to point out is you can see where the big fires are. They're pretty much in that eastern part of the Texas Panhandle. Next slide. And there to overlay, and you can see the lineup, the correlation can't really be disputed. The large wildfires are occurring in the terrain that we can't get to. In my mind, when we talk about pre-staging, and if we're talking in this committee about how to respond better to large, we'll call them the mega wildfires or the regional wildfires, well, we know where they are. I think that's a good place to look at starting to stage some of those resources and focus some of our regional and statewide mitigation efforts, in my opinion. Briefly about prescribed fire. I know this isn't the most popular topic, but next slide. This is our 7-mile burn, and the reason that we do this burn so frequently is, first of all, we have great cooperation with the 4-6's Ranch. We do not burn this every year. A lot of times we do other forms of mitigation. We strongly, matter of fact, most of our mitigation efforts are done through mechanical means. We're thinning up trees, we're mowing, we're brush hogging. We only do these burns every few years. We burn here because when we do burn here, it's flat. It's not a lot of the terrain that you might have in the eastern part, but it's a good candidate for prescribed fire. Next slide. I took this photograph 3 weeks after the prescribed fire. I'm just showing it's not totally destructive. And this is a close-up of the vegetation afterwards. So there's different types of fires that need to be identified. You have your head fires where pretty much just sand dunes, and that's all you're going to have for probably potentially years afterwards. You're going to be plowing sand off your roadways before too long. It's your head fire, high intensity, high BTUs. It's from the low humidity, the high winds. This was a relatively high humidity day. Matter of fact, the humidity was close to 50% that day. We had light winds, low BTUs. And we presented this information to TxDOT also because they had concerns about erosion and other things pertaining to fire. The fact is that prescribed fires done in the right prescription, you've still got some pretty good system there to help reduce the erosion. Something else on the prescribed fires that's important to bring up is they do help reduce the invasive species, and they help really support that native species regrowth. Part of the prescribed fires also help replenish a lot of those nutrients back into the soil. Next slide. And just a couple of before and afters. You all have seen this picture before, so I'm not going to go over this one too much. The one thing I do want to point out on this section, whenever the wildfire did come in, we had one engine. Actually, we had one engine and then a truck with a 4.6 wrench with our one engine taking that line. That's all the resources that we had on that line, and that's all that we needed to hold that line was really one truck and the 4.6 wrench. So what that burn did was that also allowed us to have the other resources go elsewhere with the active fires. And just for point of fact, this fire, the predominant length of it runs east and west, and then part of it hooks and runs north and south, and that did take a head fire, and it did stop a head fire. We didn't get the wind shifts for over an hour afterwards. So that 250-foot buffer did stop a head fire. Not just the black line that we put in. Prior to that, the 6s had actually been using that pasture for grazing, and so we had lower fuel. If they had higher fuel, a 250-foot line held, probably not, but that cooperation and coordination with the ranchers, I think, is really important in conjunction with prescribed fire. That's the last slide I had on my presentation.
Thank you very much. Members, we have this panel is made up of many different subjects. Are there any specific questions right now for Mr. Whistler? Okay, Jason.
Okay, so you said you had 13 fires that day?
According to our catalogs, some of them may have been smoke calls, but there were a lot of fires. And some of them were north on the county line, and we actually had to send Hansford County to deal with those.
So the fires you know about that were started, what started them? Or what was the investigation? Was it utilities? Was it grass just catching on fire because it's too tall? Was it chains?
Yeah, so and I'm not going to give you a song and dance answer, but I'm going to say that being an emergency manager, I wear many hats like a lot of people in small communities. During the fires, I've just barely started to take off my emergency management hat. We've been so engrossed with the wildfires, the initial response, the humanitarian need, the ag need. Tuesday, I believe it was, I had actually reached out to the Texas State Fire Marshal's office and explained to them, I don't have time to get out and do an investigation. It's like, I need help. And so they said, okay, our wildland investigator can be there. He's in Austin. We can try to be there Wednesday. We can be there Friday. I reached out to our XL reps that were in the room, and I asked them to hold that scene, and they did. They weren't going to repair the line. They actually had, my understanding, they had people watching that scene 24 hours a day. And this is specifically on the Reamer fire, because in our community, that's the one that caused a fatality, and that was the highest priority fire for us. It was Thursday evening whenever I was informed that State Fire Marshal's Office called me back and said, hey, we found out that the Texas Forest Service already did investigation there. We didn't know that. It took almost a month before I was able to get a copy of that report from TDEM. When I requested from Texas Forest Service, I was informed to file a FOIA request, even though we were the jurisdiction of authority for fire investigations. So I did get a copy of that report. According to the report, it does indicate that it was an XL line that was responsible, and that they were working with XL investigators on the 687 Reamer fire. That was the investigation done by Tyler Evans. That's the only report I've seen as of this point. I'm still working on subpoenas to get the other fires.
So you don't know what started the other fires at all?
No, sir. I'm still working on that, and those are still ongoing investigations. Because I have yet to do it, and because of what I've seen on the TFS report.
I mean, it's been a long time. You need
It has.
You want me to drive you around? I mean, what's the holdup? It's been over a month,
Yes, sir.
and you got no clue.
I told you what the report said.
Just the two power lines.
That was the report I was told on the 687, according to the report.
Go ahead.
Let me jump in. I just want to make sure that I know where we are and where the record is. This committee has heard about the investigation of 2 fires. Were you present for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But what I'm hearing now is there was actually 13 fires. Some of those merged, and it was actually 13 different ignition points. Is that where we're at?
About that. And then,
About that.
Yes.
So we've got 11 other fires that we don't know the origin, source, cause yet because they're still being investigated.
Let me qualify a couple of things. Some of those calls that we had might have been somebody seeing something burning in the black from the previous fire, those calls, but we still have to send resources back to check on them. So some of them could have been fires within the fires. I don't want to say a rekindle, but something that's, a stump or a telephone pole that's burning inside of a burned area already. But we were overwhelmed with fires.
Okay, and so I just want to make sure that, so we're going to write a report. It's due May 1st. And I want to make sure that, we're accurate in the information that is relayed. Do you know how many, separate fires started on this day?
So for the smokehouse fire, I believe there were actually 3 fires involved in that one. There was the North County Road O fire, initially is what it was referred to.
That's the one that we know has been investigated.
That one has been investigated by Texas Forest Service,
Okay.
Texas A&M Forest Service.
North County O fire.
Yes, which was later renamed to the smokehouse. That was the original fire.
Okay.
687 Reamer fire, which resulted in 1 fatality in Hudson County.
Okay.
Which that one ran into the smokehouse fire. And so
Who's investigating that?
Tyler Evans with Texas A&M Forest Service has already conducted investigation on that, and we're following up with our own investigation.
That's not one of the 2 reports we saw here today, though, is it?
Don't believe so. I do not believe he provided any testimony.
Do you know what the cause of that fire was? The 687 is it Reamer fire?
Yes, sir. That one, according to their report, was the power lines owned by XL Energy.
Did it have any more explanation as to
Very little.
how that one actually got done? Okay, so we don't have that report yet, at least in this committee's possession, but there's that fire.
Right. That's the only report I have at this time.
You have a copy of it?
Yes, sir.
Can you provide us that report?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So fire number 3. What is fire number 3?
Fire number 3 was off Clemens Road. It's in a rural area southeast of Scotts Acres, right along the Canadian River.
Okay.
That one actually did not burn for very long on its own until it also went into the smokehouse fire.
Do we know the cause of that fire?
I do not.
Do you know who's investigating the cause of that fire?
I will be investigating that one and talking
You will?
with the fire chief. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So what's the 5th fire?
Windy Deuce.
Okay. We've got the right report. We heard that today.
And that one was not in our jurisdiction. However, since it did impact many communities and homes in our jurisdiction, we felt it was worthy to conduct an independent
Okay.
follow-up investigation on that.
Sixth fire.
I did not bring my CAD logs. There are the dispatch logs. We do have fires that were on the north side of the county that I believe were handled by Hansford County for us.
Okay.
They were very small and did not result in much property damage. I think we had some other relatively, fortunately, small fires in the community.
That were managed and extinguished fairly quickly?
Yes.
Okay. So you will get us the 687 Reamer fire report, and then whenever you get finished with the Plymouth Road fire investigation, you're going to provide that to us as well?
Yes, sir.
And do you think that that will be done in the next, 10 days so that we can include and make that possibly part of our report?
I will try my best.
So if you can't, I'm not asking you,
and I
I'm not
would-
asking you to do it. I'm asking you, do you think that it will be made available to us prior to then?
I will do my absolute best to try to make that happen.
Do you have any indication as you sit here today as to what caused that Plymouth Road fire that you have not yet investigated?
I do not.
All right. Thank you, sir.
I would have to refer to the fire chief on that response.
All right. Members, further questions for Mr. Whistler? No? Okay. Okay. Let's go to Mr. Ferguson.
My name's Cal Ferguson. I own and operate 4F Outfitters in Roberts County. Also a landowner. My place burned in its entirety, and I lost about 55,000 acres of my lease ground. After the third day of helping people put cattle down and trying to figure out what to do next, started thinking more about the wildlife side and got with Parks and Wildlife and started talking to them about gathering feed and distributing feed, and they didn't have any interest at all. Jason kind of knows how they view that. They're not big on supplemental feed at all. So I put the word out and ended up having 170 tons of feed donated, mostly protein, and then 100 tons of hay, 40 feeders, 10 tons of seed that we're going to be able to fly in if we can get Jason's help on that. That's just overall different kinds of seed blends. I think that we figured the math on it would do like 90 feet wide for 320 miles. That's another thing that I kind of was really hoping that Parks and Wildlife would jump in and want to be a part of, or we could come up with some funding on. But let's see. That's the other thing too, that it was a little confusing to me on that side. There's really been no assessment of loss on the wildlife at all. And so for somebody like me, not knowing going into the season, like on antelope permits and stuff like that, I don't have a clue where I stand other than what I've seen myself in the field, and would love to see some help on that side. I know they did say today that, they would make an effort towards that, but I think that that's super crucial, like in the riparian areas, getting it to where, we're not going to have as much runoff and erosion, and keep the water clean and provide cover, because as of right now, the antelope are fixing to start fawning in the next 2 weeks probably. Turkey and quail and all that have no nesting cover at all. I canceled all of my turkey hunts for the year, to the tune of about 25 grand. And then same for quail. It'll be a solid 2 years before we have any quail to hunt, at least. And so, one of my biggest questions would be, like on an operator's side, for guys like us that mostly just lease, even though I do own some land, where's the protection going to be for us? Like, we really don't have a safety net. The state owns the deer, and you can't insure them. And so there's really no way for us to recoup our 4 or 5 years worth of loss, and people don't realize that the fawns that won't be born this year will be our income that we lose in 6 years. And so just curious, is there any programs or anything that is going to help, even on the cattle side? You know, I've got friends that lease a ton of grass but don't own much. Where do they stand? Where will their help come from?
Mr. Jason.
Well, Cal, good news. Texas Parks and Wildlife said it'll be better. So
Yeah.
so problem solved.
Well, yeah. And
Let's
it's-
just burn it up and you'll be all right.
Right.
No, I feel your pain. You know, when I was kind of surprised with the Texas Parks and Wildlife when we asked them what the damage was. I mean, they kind of looked at, like we caught them flat-footed or kind of gut shot them. That they never thought of that.
Right.
And maybe you can enlighten us on, as you're not the only guy in town that does this.
Right.
And the income that hunting brings in, and the lot when you burn up this romance value of the hunting country.
Right.
You know, well, just for instance, we, you know, back for the recreation deal was cool. You know, back in the early 90s, we bought ranches for ranch land. And that ranch right next to you, I bought for $75.
Right.
And then somebody like Boone Pickens rolls in for recreation. I sell it to him for $1,500 an acre. So recreation is a big dang deal. It takes, you know, the cows almost take the second seat behind recreation.
Right.
So I would like, I mean, I don't know, you don't have to tell us dollar figure or what you make or what you lose, but you need to kind of, I mean, it'd be nice to have an ideal of a guy like you, what kind of income loss you're going to be seeing. And I'm not talking about, I mean, we've got no clue how many years it's going to take to get our deer back. I mean, I've got a deer that we all love, and everybody that follows me on Instagram all loves, and I haven't seen him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's part of the family.
Yes, sir.
And I know you got the same thing, but can you give us some kind of a number that you're looking at that you're going to be out for the next couple of years?
Well, I mean, just like with turkey alone, in the next 6 weeks, that's about 25 grand. Quail will be closer to 30 for each year moving forward. And then deer, it just varies on them. I mean, we sell our trophy deer hunts for $7,000. And so, that part's going to be tough. And also on the landowner side, you know, that's 20 to 50% of income for most of these landowners that there's no safety net on. Like, there's none of the ag programs are going to go towards that. So there's just no answers to it.
Okay, Cal, you asked us a question about is there a program. I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I don't think there necessarily is, but I'll ask for you. We ranch, my wife ranches in South Texas.
Mm-hmm.
It's cow-calf. We lease our land, basically pay the property taxes for hunting.
Right.
You know, if we didn't have that, it'd be difficult some years. I truly understand that. And, you know, I always feel like when somebody comes here and asks a direct question, they deserve a direct answer. Even if I don't know the answer to it, I want to tell you that I don't know. I understand what you're saying, and I'll try to get one. And if we don't have it here, we'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Members, other questions, Mr. Burks? I don't know the answer to that, Cal, either. I mean, that's in all my years, that's the first time I've ever been asked that question.
Right.
So, but I do think it's worth digging into, and probably you're not going to like the answer.
Right.
But you do deserve an answer, and that's what I was getting at with Parks and Wildlife, and so was Dustin and Jason. You know, we were all talking to them about, you know, the aesthetic value of land isn't just cows and fences. It's the joy of the land and what you can sell it for. So I don't know. there's no program for you right now that I can think of, but let us look into it and see what we can come up with, and we'll get back to you.
Sounds good.
Thanks for being here. All right. Dr. Thomas Lansford.
Thank you, Chairman King, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to come sit and visit with y'all and provide some insight, kind of the role of the Texas Animal Health Commission in the emergency management arena, and then also more specifically our role in the response during this tragic event. I wanted to also thank you all for your work to improve the response to these types of events, and certainly just as importantly, and maybe even more so, your work in mitigating these types of events. So with that, we do have a presentation. Ms. Tejan Hale is going to cover that for us. Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm just going to go through some slides here real quick just to kind of give you a background of our agency. Most of y'all are probably familiar with us, but some people aren't. And then go into what we do typically in these types of responses, and then what we did in this response. So next slide, please. Overall, the mission of the Animal Health Commission is to protect the animal industry from and mitigate the effect of domestic, foreign, and emerging diseases. We are there to increase the marketability of Texas livestock commodities at the state, national, and international level. We're here to promote and ensure animal health and productivity, protect human health from animal disease and conditions that are transmissible to people. And then the last one is what pertains to what we're talking about today: prepare for and respond to emergency situations involving animals by conducting agency business in a responsive, cooperative, and transparent manner. Next slide. We have legislative authority to regulate the prevention, control, and or eradication of specific contagious or infectious disease in livestock and poultry, including the ones you see here on the side there. So I'll let y'all look at those. Okay, next slide. How our workforce is compiled. Basically, this is everyone that works for us. You have operational and support personnel. We have obviously veterinarians and epidemiologists. The state veterinarian is our, an executive director is the lead at our agency. We have livestock inspectors throughout the state. We have legal and compliance folks. We have emergency management, communications department, and administrative and support personnel. As far as what we do in response with our partners, we are part of the Emergency Support Function 11, and what that support function does is organizes the integrated response for incidents involving ag, animals, food, feed supply, provision of nutritional assistance, and or natural, cultural, and historical resources. As far as our main partners, of course ourselves, and then one of our main partners is Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, whom you've heard a lot from, and also the Texas Department of Agriculture. Now that is, we also have a lot of other folks and agencies that are part of ESF 11, but those are the main ones. As far as our role specifically, we've been designated by TDM as the lead state agency for animal issues and natural disasters and foreign and or emerging animal diseases. So what does that look like? The main things that we do in responses like this are to plan for natural disasters and disease response, so this is pre-disaster, coordinate the response to the animal issues during the disaster, work with local, state, and federal officials, evacuation and sheltering needs when those are an issue. And then one of our main things that we do is we conduct initial animal needs assessments. Those are different from the damage assessments that were referred to earlier. And again, some of the partners that we typically work with in these responses are going to be obviously veterinarians, ranchers, livestock markets, and of course producers. And then we'll talk a little bit about the wildfires that just occurred. Overall, our objectives for the Animal Health Commission on any type of response would be to conduct and coordinate animal response operations in support of local jurisdictions. We come in to help support those local jurisdictions. We do not take over. We are there to provide agency representation in the State of Texas Emergency Operations Center, or the SOC, for reporting and coordination with other state agencies. So we are there all the time during an activation. We also activate and deploy animal response teams as needed to that local jurisdiction, provide subject matter expertise on mitigating health and safety risks for the evacuation, transportation, rescue, and sheltering of livestock, assist in the coordination of donation efforts, and then coordinate animal needs assessments and assist in prioritizing response activities and operations. So a lot of overall coordination and assistance. As far as a little bit of timeline of what we did during these fires, on February 27th, we did increase our posture and conducted the following activities. We participated in all the situational awareness calls that TDM was having. Here, in our Amarillo region manager, our field veterinarian, and our livestock inspectors in this region monitored the wildfires and contacted local ag stakeholders and our coordinating partners. So the reason we did that was to receive some status updates, to address any animal issues at that time, and then to identify potential future needs. And then, of course, our THC policy and leadership folks within the agency were already contacted by or were contacting our ag industry partners. And then on February 28th, we were activated for ESF 11 to provide livestock support. So we did start doing that in the area. THC conducted the following activities to continue those coordination efforts. We began conducting our daily internal coordination calls. We also began conducting those daily industry stakeholder calls. Calls were made to local veterinarians to determine their projected needs if they felt like they were going to be in trouble and needed help in that respect. And then we also coordinated with state veterinarians in Oklahoma and New Mexico to facilitate those waivers of interstate animal movements and the documentation that was typically needed for that. And then again, some more on that day. Our communications department maintained a very strong social media presence and worked at highlighting the following. We every day we put out where the physical and monetary donations for animals should be directed. We did always provide information on the TDA Hay hotline and their STAR fund. We also provided on social media where people could document and report their losses. We gave information on all the animal supply points, where they were, who to contact, and then also we did some animal health monitoring. And then just the rest of the time overall throughout the rest of the response, some of the things that we were doing was that we definitely had a THC representative at the DDEOC. And we had a field staff and livestock inspectors deployed out in the field. We began conducting those what we call animal needs assessments, and I can explain those a little bit more. What those are is basically roadside surveillance. Our teams are going out to the areas where it's safe, as soon as it's safe to get out there, and they are visiting. If there is a landowner present, they are visiting with them and asking them what their needs are. Do they have animals still alive? Do they need feed? Do they need assistance in any way? What do they need? And also, while we're there doing that, we are getting death loss numbers. And so that's where that 7,350 number that y'all have been hearing initially came from. A lot of that came from that surveillance and reaching out to folks. And then also, while we were doing those, we were also distributing to the folks handouts on some of the programs we've talked about today that were available to ranchers. We also handed out information on carcass disposal and that kind of thing. So we were providing these folks with some information while we were doing that as well. And then we also provided support to the animal supply points. And if they had hay that needed to go out to individual ranchers, we were helping with that, driving it out there to them. And then we just maintained situational awareness, communicating daily with our partners, our animal industry partners, producers, local state response officials, and of course the Texas A&M Veterinary Emergency Response Team.
All right. Do what? Okay. Members, Mr. Hunter. No questions. Okay. I got one. All right. Mr. Abraham.
I don't know if I'm probably the only one up here at this table that's got an account with y'all. So I guess it's not much of a question. It's more of just I know what y'all do, and I thank you for it, because it's not a very glamorous job. You spend a lot of you're highly educated and very intelligent, and you get to do a very cruddy job, in my opinion. and I appreciate that. And I'm glad I haven't had to visit y'all in a long time. But just so y'all know what y'all do, I want everybody to know it is not glamorous at all, and it's the job that nobody else wants to do, and we appreciate you, and that's pretty much all I got.
Thank you.
Chairman Burrows.
And Cal, I want to jump back to you for a second. The magic of having these microphones is people listen and start trying to get answers to questions. And I just need one quick follow-up from you. Okay. Just to confirm, you mentioned some prices and some income you're going to lose this year. What I'm assuming, but I want to make sure it's clear, that's what you charge for the hunts to third parties, and the landowner is not getting a percentage of that. You're just entered into a hunting lease where you pay a per acre fee?
I have it structured different ways on different ranches.
Okay.
Some of them I pay by the acre, and that's usually just depending on like what all they have. You know, some of my ranches are just for antelope, and then some of them will have antelope, whitetail, mule deer, turkey, quail, and everything. And so, yeah, the price per acre is based on, you know, the diversity of what they have on the ranch.
They're not getting a percentage. By the way, I don't know why this is relevant to the question you asked, but I was told to get some clarification because maybe there's some answering that's coming. But I assume you're just paying it may vary what the per acre price is, but that's the base, and the prices you talked about is what you sell the hunts for. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right, just want to make sure. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Okay. Members, further questions of this committee? Yes.
Just since I have the opportunity with this audience here, years past, insurance companies would at least talked about communities that participated in community wildfire protection plans, fire-wise communities, and offering homeowner discounts for being in those communities. It's kind of dwindled. I think USAA might have been one of them. State Farm certainly supports the Firewise program. The reason I'm bringing this up is because if you monetize and give your citizens a benefit to saving insurance money, and at the same time we can provide better protection, if it's an incentive for them to do things more around their house, as far as these plans. I don't know if that's something in your alley. I know it seems like insurance is a little bit of a hot topic. I think a lot of the insurance industry support our efforts, but it just seems like that support's dwindling, and there's less and less that are really getting involved with it. If I had a magic wand and could wish for one thing, it would be something of that nature to help some monetary benefit to your community, and it's a insurance risk reduction for the carriers. Just something maybe worth discussing at some point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Thank y'all so much for being here. All right. We have one panel left today. Thanks for hanging in there. If everybody's still here, we're going to knock this one out. We have chair calls Mike Wisco, Keith Blair, and Jeff Haley. I'm good. Let's go. There's Mr. Haley. Okay. Mike, I have you as Mike Wisco, Agency Chief, Texas Commission on Fire Protection.
How about that? Yes, sir. That's right.
Keith, I have you as Keith Blair. Who's he represent? Just representing yourself.
Basically.
Well, we just need to know.
Yes. Well,
yes.
I'm a product of Texas Tech University.
But are you representing Texas Tech, or are you representing
I'm
yourself?
not.
Keith Blair representing
Yes.
himself, and that's correct.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Haley, Jeff Haley, Gray County Commissioner. You're representing yourself and Gray County Commissioner's Court?
Yes.
Or your precinct?
Yes. Precinct 4 and myself.
Okay, gotcha. Do any of you gentlemen have an opening statement you'd like to start with?
Yes, sir, I do, and I trimmed it down from 3 hours to about an hour and a half.
That'd be great. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Mike Wisco. I am the agency chief for the Commission on Fire Protection, or as we've been referred to this week, TCFP. Our role is to develop and enforce training and certification standards for career firefighters in Texas. We also enforce safety standards related to the firefighter protective equipment provided by the local government employers. In addition, we work with and support our state partners in training, emergency response, and emergency management. I'm honored to be here today and sincerely hope that I can assist in determining how we can continue our work together to improve the response to major incidents. I have over 36 years experience in both career and volunteer fire and emergency medical services in Southeast Texas. I proudly served 31 years with the Galveston Fire Department and retired as the fire chief in 2019. During my career, I had the privilege of responding to a multitude of natural and man-made disasters, not only in my hometown, but across the state and the United States. I empathize with the pain and suffering endured by the citizens of the Panhandle in recent weeks. I have endured similar pain due to hurricanes in my hometown. That trauma stays with you for the rest of your life. Texas is fortunate to have one of the premier statewide fire service mutual aid systems in the country. Galveston was the first community to request TIFMAS following Hurricane Ike in 2008, and I have been a grateful recipient and proud responder with TIFMAS ever since. Texas has some of the best trained firefighters, volunteer and career, in the United States. There's little difference between a career and a volunteer firefighter in Texas. They are all driven by a passion and a dedication to serve their fellow man in times of need, regardless of the personal risk. Texas is a vast state with a multitude of wildfire and weather challenges. Adequately responding and controlling these events requires coordination, equipment, and training. This preparedness is expensive. The key elements remain good coordination, communication, and financial support. Thank you for the opportunity to get out of Austin and travel to the Panhandle this week, and I'm available for any questions you might have for me.
Yes, sir. I guess maybe I'm here because of my mentors at Texas Tech. Henry A. Wright started prescribed burning in 1967. I'm a former chairman of the advisory board to the Prescribed Burn Board of Texas Department of Agriculture. I stepped down because I got tired of driving to Austin. As of February, I'm a former lead burn instructor for TDA. I missed a one-day required annual meeting in February during burn season, and I was actually sitting on a prescribed burn, monitoring it and mopping up, and that's what I was doing, so I got decertified. I resubmitted my application the next day, and I developed the training. I'm also a commercial prescribed burn manager for the state of Texas. I do have a short presentation. I don't know if I do it now. Okay. So I did this maybe a week ago and wasn't sure it got through, but anyway, I've got some definitions there, and we've been fighting this for, I don't know, 30 years. And the reason I put that up there is we often get compared to a controlled burn, which could be my grandmother when she burned her leaves in her yard. And that actually happened in Abilene one time, but they called it a controlled burn. So we try to separate ourselves, and so that definition of a prescribed burn is actually from the Texas Administrative Code. Thank you. So, and of course, here it is again. They did a prescribed burn, and it was called controlled, but I did want to give kudos to Archie Stone and Borger for thinking about doing this. Yeah. So, we have talked a lot about fire suppression and how we're doing it, and I just wanted to show this. This is a very old slide from years ago, and people still use it, but if you remove any one of those off the fire triangle, you can put the fire out. And we focused a lot on air and heat and suppressing fires, but we really haven't addressed fuels. And so maybe at some point that needs to be looked at, and whether it's through managed grazing, prescribed burning, however it can be done, and manage that fuel in a way that it doesn't harm the land, but it also will help stop some wildfires. So this was a prescribed burn in February the 23rd. That was the Friday. We got the forecast. It was met. We run a pretty tight prescription with our burns because we don't have the big equipment that everybody else has. We have a brush truck that usually sits there because we're often in very rough terrain. We do a lot of burning in the Texas hill country. So this landowner called, and you can go to the next slide. And so here's after the burn was completed. Most of the residual smoke is actually from cow pies. And I did want to say something about that windbreak. That was from the former landowner, and that's where he was going to build his house. But my question is why are we planting high volatile windbreaks next to our houses? It makes absolutely no sense. Because grass fire is one thing, and whatever the flame lengths are there, it's probably going to triple or quadruple or even more once it hits that windbreak that's volatile. And so maybe that needs to be addressed and might help some. This was actually funded by a grant from the Texas Forest Service. So this landowner called me and said, hey, would you be my burn manager and try to get the grant? And we barely got it submitted, and then we were selected, so the landowner got reimbursed for the cost of that burn. Yeah. So I say solutions, I say maybe these are ideas, and I'm just, this is a pet peeve of mine I've had for years because I've watched other states, and even when we set up the burn manager program, we looked at probably 15 different states and what their programs were already doing. And so some of the stronger states, they have curriculums in schools, and it kind of just educates, and I'm going to talk about educating adults here in a minute, but it just gives kids, what is good fire, what is bad fire, and things like that. And that there's lots of curriculums to choose from out there that we could tweak, and I think it should be tweaked to fit the region that you're in, and so that kids learn good fire, bad fire, and what to do in their different situations. Okay. And so this one's just out of the southwest region of the USDA Forest Service, and it just goes through a bunch of different little topics that could be hit on and talked about. Next. So, I think we have a fuels management problem, especially compared to what some other states are doing. And I'm not comparing us to Florida, but Florida does have the highest frequency of lightning on Earth, and so they deal with that, and so they do a lot of fuels management. Florida is a gross negligent state, so the prescribed burners are pretty well protected. I mean, they have to really, really do something stupid. Whereas Texas is simple negligent, and so any little thing could land you in trouble on that. Okay, and so you can go to the next slide. So there's numerous research publications on historical fire frequency. Mine is actually a little bit longer than most for this region and the rolling plains, and it's because I believe bison made a difference. When you get that many animals that maybe have moved across the plains, then they probably created a pretty good fire break. And so I just wanted to point that out. Thank you. This is black lines in 1987, and we use these a lot on our prescribed burns rather than just ringing a pasture. We put those in first, and then there's our general prescription there, and it's fairly tight, and most of that is based on experience that Dr. Wright started at Texas Tech. It was you lit it and saw what happened, and if it spotted, you said, okay, well, the humidity and temp needs to be different, and that's how that got tweaked into what we call the 40-60 rule of burning black lines. Yeah. So most drivers in Texas, and this is just another pet peeve of mine because I serve as an expert witness on numerous cases of smoke on the highway and people doing the wrong thing when they encounter it. And so next slide. I've sent this to Texas Department of Texas Department of Transportation probably 10 times over the last 20 years and no response. But it tells people what to do and encountering smoke, and so I wish Texas would do something like this. Next. And then they do talk about prescribed burning. Next. So we've talked about, we've kind of beat the fire poles to death. We also have chains on highway. I counted 7 areas on the interstate from Lubbock to Amarillo whenever I came here. And so I thought about how to use whatever it is. You know, we're thinking of black lines stopping the head fire the wildfire coming at you with 50-mile-an-hour eye-level winds. But what I'm thinking about is, where are these fires starting? Let's say we were able to somehow fix the power pole situation, then what's next? Is it from the highways? And is there something we can do to fund or grant counties that want to do it on certain major highways or whatever highway they want, but burn out those bar ditches? Most ranches have a bladed line on the inside of their fence on a highway, and that would be good training. And also I think it would maybe stop the ignition from those cigarettes, chains, anything that happens on the side of the road. Thank you. So these are lightning flashes in March 2006, and I just wanted to show it. It was the 4/6 fire years ago, and I had to, as an expert witness, I have to eliminate all the causes, and I did get on the day of the burn and there were no lightning, and so I had to prove where that fire started, and it turned out good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. You have a question?
Yeah,
Dustin.
Yeah, Mr. Blair, you I guess you asked at the beginning, why you were here.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I may be partly responsible for that. I think my aunt used to burn with you back at Texas Tech.
And she's very convincing.
She is very convinced. She convinced me that you were the person that Chairman King gave me a heads up that obviously this was a big issue up in the area.
Yeah.
And I got a little, I figured we might be tired of hearing from Aggies, no offense, we'll get someone from Texas Tech.
Right.
And so she said I had to bring you up here to testify, and it's been real good. I do want to ask you one question.
Okay.
Because I'm kind of gathering this, and I don't live up here, but there's some concern maybe about the terrain up here that's different than other places, that maybe it just doesn't work the same. And I don't know if you could speak to that or if you've burned up here or not.
Yes, I have. And, we have a 7,000 acre burn scheduled north of Silverton. And it's difficult. It has steep canyons, but I've learned, and we put our black lines in an easy area. and, not try to kill ourselves, putting a black line in through a canyon, things like that. So there are ways to strategically set that up and do that. And so this burn is on its second year of planning. There's some brushwork going on. There's some brushwork going on inside the black line that we're going to burn in. And so it's going to be a longer process than some of our normal burns. But most of the burns we did at Texas Tech were on the 4.6s, JY, Triangle, places like that have some rough country.
Thank you.
And can I say one more thing? So if you do have any questions about the Certified Burn Manager Program and insurance and what we're going through.
I do.
Okay.
There you go. Mr. Hunter.
Wanted to help you out.
All right.
So you're a certified burn manager?
A commercial certified burn manager.
So tell me about getting insurance.
This time I got lucky. I normally lose my insurance every 4 to 5 years because of other burners. So anybody that might have my same insurance, and if they mess up, then they drop everybody. So I was concerned. This is my second year with the new insurance, which the person you get it from makes no difference. It's the underwriter, and y'all know that. And so it's now Lloyd's of London, but I was concerned that it was as soon as I lose it again, then I'm hoping I get to Social Security quick.
So have you done any study of Lloyd's of London and all their wildfires over there? I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
So do you know, and we're going to ask this because I want everybody to understand the different type of insurance coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be amazed that some, when I say aren't regulated,
right,
what that means. But do you know if you have a regulated, you don't know. But you were able to get it.
Yes.
So there's a possibility that you are with an unregulated company.
Could be.
And how easy do you think it's going to be to get a claim paid?
I've never had a claim, so I don't know.
So can you tell us who the company is?
Rigdon.
Oh, we've already heard about them.
Right.
That's twice today.
Yeah.
So, and they're the one out of Illinois?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you got Lloyd's of London out of Illinois. Now, if you're not certified, can you even get insurance?
I don't know the answer to that. I know a landowner can. It's part of their ranching operation.
Now, yesterday, as Chairman King and I had talked last night, we had somebody who was certified, but they were certified through the city or county.
Right.
And you're not.
No. There's a private certified burn manager and there's a commercial.
And I want you to say that in the record because this is part of what we need. Tell us the difference between you and the public protected.
And the public.
In other words, you've got some that work for a city or county. They've got basically the city or county protection.
Right. And most of what I deal with in training is there's some large ranches like the King Ranch, and most of their managers are private certified burn managers, and the insurance is paid by the King Ranch.
And there are others who may be certified that work or employed through a city or a county that are able to get protection of city or county caps and immunity.
What did you say?
Well, we'll be talking about that tomorrow. That may be something you can check on.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're employed through a county or a city, there are caps on damages.
Right.
And you may be able to take advantage of city or county immunity, sovereign immunity.
Oh,
so
right.
you wouldn't be in that situation.
Right.
Bottom line is you're private, you're registered, you're in a situation where it's hard to get, and you may be through unregulated.
Right.
And Chairman, we'll talk about it more tomorrow, so everybody here is knowledgeable and protected. Thank you. Good comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Blair, last question I had for you. You started your comments off saying that you lost your certification. Now,
As a lead burn instructor.
as a lead burn instructor,
'Cause I
not your,
missed
not your
a-
commercial license.
right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you can still, you don't need the lead burn instructor to get
No.
Lloyd's of London.
No.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Haley, sorry to make you wait all day, and you are our last witness, so please tell us what you got.
I'm a Gray County Commissioner, Jeff Haley, been a commissioner for 16 years. Y'all had a long day, so I won't keep you long. But I'd like to give you just a little idea on what the county does from the precinct perspective on these fires. I have the southeastern part of Gray County, which is 95% rangeland, so we catch the worst bad fires. Since 2006, our precinct has had 5 major fires. All but one fire can be attributed to some sort of electrical line ignition. One was 2018 was a suspicious circumstance fire, excuse me, at Lake McClellan, probably an arson caused on a high wind day. We respond with the fire departments, with our maintainers, and with water tankers, and we neighbor with our other counties, other entities when they need help. We go. When I serve with the crew as a communicator. The way it works where we are, you know everybody. We're intimate with the landowners. We know everybody. We know each other. We're intimate with the places. So I assist in, everybody's calling me, the neighbors, the other places, and we're talking about where they need to go with the cattle, where the heads are going on this fire, on the fires. The crews go with the fire departments. It's kind of our precinct rule. They go with the fire truck unless there's 2 maintainers together. It's for safety reasons. Proud to say we haven't lost anybody or any machines in our precinct, and we've had some major fires. At one time in the 2017 fire, we had 5 maintainers stuck in Cantonment Creek at the same time. After dark, we got everybody out of that, saved everything. So we have quite a bit of experience. I think just some observations here. These high wind-driven fires are so hard to stop. I mean, we just really do not have the capability to stop them until the humidity gets up or the wind changes or dies down. We can just try to help containers save places, save homes, save structures. These wind-driven fires and this fuel are just next to impossible to stop. My observation that when we have these big fires, they're caused these electrical systems are failing in the high winds, and they've got the high winds to drive them, and that's the difference when we're seeing these fires started along the highways from a chain, which we see a lot of them. We have I-40, we have 273, we have some major roads, but they're not all started in the high winds. They can be started at any time. Some of them are, but when those high wind cause those electric lines to fail, you can bet we're going to have a bad fire. And I think that's why we're all here, is because of that. Those are the facts. So I have a strong disagreement with my county judge. I think these are not acts of God. I think these are preventable. These fires are human events, and they're preventable. So I think that's why we're here today. We're tired of it. We're looking for some answers to have better practices. We're adapting as landowners and ranchers. We're adapting as a county to this. And the fire's been part of the prairie ecosystem since the word go. Okay? But what our concern is when you're burning up millions of dollars of investment, fences, livestock, nature heals it back. But what's 10 years to Mother Nature, 10 years to human life is a long time. It's hard for people to come back. When you've got to pay your taxes, you got to pay the banker. So that's why I'm happy. I thank you all. Appreciate your time and your efforts to help solve this problem. I think now's the good time. It's on everybody's mind. 06 happened. kind of went away. It kind of got everybody's thinking. But we're back, and I hope and pray that you all can get something done in Austin and take some of these solutions. There's a couple things from a county perspective or commissioner's perspective I would like for you all to think about. And one is for us to get permission to go back and rehabilitate fire lines. We have some landowners that are a little bit hesitant to want you to go in there with a blade and make a big fire line if you're not going to come back and fix it. And those fire lines can be pretty big and pretty vicious, and I think that's a lot of the reason the Forest Service gets a bad name is they come in there and it's wrecked. I mean, honestly, it's sad in some places what it looks like to this rangeland. And I think the Great Plains, we're about the only ones that really can come in there with maintainers and fight a fire. Most places can't do that. They don't have the terrain and topography, and we can't do it all in all of our landscape anyway. But a great part of it we can, and maintainers are effective. The other thing was talking about, I heard earlier today about some resources, water tanks. I think there was a system where we can map those. Personally, I have some storage tanks, and I have some 100,000-gallon water storage tanks that I put taps on the county roads where we can get our tenders filled, and then they can nurse trucks from there. But those resources tanks where Jason, he knows the country, but other pilots, if we could have some pins and some geolocation, if there's a source for these guys to know where to go without having to search, that would be huge, I think. And those are just the two main things I would like to have you all think about that I think would help on the ground for us.
So I've got a question. It's not a county commissioner question. It's a rancher question.
Okay.
So as we used to be neighbors, so I know your country. A lot of these fires aren't started by the big power companies. A lot of them are started by, I don't know, look like they planted a 4-inch pole in 1920 and they're still holding up their power line that, I mean, you rode through the same country. Some of them were clothesline you. How do we, the railroad commissioner will be here, and I'm pretty sure I know their answer. I'm pretty sure you do too. Do you have any suggestions on what we do with that?
I think the railroad commission should inspect these facilities, inspect these operators. A lot of these wells need to be plugged. They're riding a plug-in bond forever, and they need to be plugged. They need to be plugged and abandoned, and they're able just to ride these things out for too long. Maintain the power to them. They're probably carrying them as asset on their books, and they don't want to get rid of it. They're probably banking it as they're probably carrying it as an asset on their books. Jason,
you talking about the railroad commission?
No, I'm talking about I'm talking about the operator.
Okay. Yeah.
And then and he's not producing anything.
Right.
Those wells need to be plugged, need to be abandoned, need to be cleaned up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We deal with a lot of that. We're fighting fires and that stuff. Yeah. Our maintainer operators are dodging flow lines. I've heard it today. I mean, that's real. And power lines. And sometimes the power lines are down in the fire.
Yeah.
And they're low.
Yeah.
It's a miracle we don't get more people killed than we do fighting these fires.
Yeah. I know you have too. I've rode by some poles and I didn't even get off my horse and I picked the pole up and stood it back up.
Yeah, I mean,
it's that bad.
It is.
But you can't get anybody to fix it, and the power companies keep hooking them up.
Well, they do. And maybe Excel, when they cut the power, which I think some people were upset about it, I was happy. And yeah. I actually told someone else, I said, I think these operators ought to thank them. They're probably saving them from starting another fire.
Yeah.
For cutting them off. And if that's what it takes, we have to adapt.
Well, and
if they're not going to replace a 70-year-old infrastructure, which is why it's failing, in my opinion, then cut it off. Make a change. Yeah. We got to adapt. We can't keep repeating this.
Well, we've got technology that can actually monitor. They can remotely shut. They don't have to shut the whole town of La Forge off. They can remotely shut different zones off to shut, different pump jacks off or zones that are there. It's pretty simple.
I'm sure
there's
probably
technology that as soon as the wire snaps, soon as they get a drop in the line, it immediately kills the whole power system out. I mean, there's a lot of technology that just they don't want to spend, and you know, and what I see is if I'm in. Last time you hooked up a water well, I bet they had some specs that you had to follow. You had to have the pole the right height, the pole that far in the ground, the pole that big.
That's right.
Before they would hook you up.
That's right.
It doesn't apply to the oil field, apparently.
You know, maybe they're a better customer. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, luckily, I don't have to use Excel, so. But it's hard. It's hard on the county. You know, we don't budget for these fires. You know, our precinct, we eat it. We eat the money, and guess what? Somebody else's roads for a month or two don't get drugged as much. You know, we have a certain amount for diesel, a certain amount for labor, a certain amount from repairs. And when these fires, whether people really know it directly or not, they're affected indirectly when we're having to spend so much resources fighting these fires. And it just keeps happening. And that's, you know,
sadly.
Yeah. I mean, me and you, we've been down this road
a long time.
Yeah. We don't take turns burning up. We actually burn up the same day.
Yeah, right.
Different fires.
Yeah, different fires, same day.
Yeah. And you're right when everybody says, well, it's starting off the highway. Well, those fires on a windy day, those just can't see that. It's like the power line and wind go hand in hand. Because
the wind's causing the old line to fail. It finally fails. And it's because it's in my opinion, you know, they're not, these new lines aren't blowing down, Jason. We see them. They're not new lines that are blowing down.
No.
It's not new infrastructure.
No. And it's and there's a solution, but there's going to be some pain involved.
There's pain involved now.
Yeah. Somebody, we're ready to share the pain with somebody else.
There's real pain right now.
I'll pass.
Members, questions? Anybody else on this panel? Well, thank you all for your testimony. Jeff, before you leave though, I gotta say, you follow instructions well. You came in, gave your testimony, you added solutions that we can put in the report and actually do something about it. And listen, I'm tired. The whole reason of this committee is I'm tired of the pain too. You know, everybody that has to deal with this over and over is sick of it, and something's got to change. And if our weather pattern isn't going to change, where we get rain every 30 days, we got to do something. But I do appreciate you being here, appreciate all of you being here, and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you all. Thank you.
So, day 2's down, folks. Members, that concludes today's agenda. Is there any further business for the committee to address? What would that be, Mr. Burrows?
Well, you probably didn't notice, I just got sent, Osmos found time to respond to a press inquiry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Texas?
Texas Tribune reached out to them, and they basically found time to do that. They said even though they're in 49 states, inspecting polls across, all of these, they can't find a single person who can come to Pampa, Texas to testify in front of our committee. They're too busy, but they are willing to meet privately, I guess, behind closed doors where the good people of this region can't hear them with our staff. They don't want us here asking them questions because they're a little bit afraid of that, but they're willing to do that. I don't think that's good enough, Mr. Chairman. I think that's still insulting, not just to this committee, but to the people of this community on that. But I wanted you to just be aware that they found time to say one more thing to the press to try to defend themselves while they're in crisis management mode.
Well, whatever they said to the press, I wouldn't put much stock in it because they said they would participate in any investigation. They completely blew off this committee, which is an investigative committee. So whatever they told the Texas Tribune, well, I think we could find a better use for that article. Members, now is there any further business to address with the committee? If not, chair moves to adjourn. Is there objection? Hearing none, this committee stands adjourned. Subject call the chair.
Sorry, Ken. I loved it. I wanted to surprise you.
Hey, oh yeah.
They're not. 49 states they have people to inspect it. They can't get one person over here.
Uh-huh.